They feel helpless, they don't feel heard, they have nowhere to turn.
In all honesty, we try to lay low a little bit because of the fear that we would not be able to camp there.
And I titled it A Shot Across the Bow of the Good Old Boys.
Hello everybody. I don't think I've ever done a video before on here, but yeah, I wanted to tell y'all what frustrates me a little bit about permits.
The cockroach of the week is, drumroll please, Allie Feaster Smith.
We can't be apathetic about what's going on in our state. We have to all pull up our bootstraps and get on top of this. So you're right. There's a problem out there. I mean, and man, you can see it everywhere.
Well, look, we have allowed government to become our wherewithal to everything.
Well, I've not heard my name in stable or Baton Rouge in stable in the same sentence in a long time.
You're about to be killed by a Zamboni, or you're gonna die in 5 minutes.
This Bossier Watch live broadcast is brought to you by David B. Womack for all your contracting and construction needs. The Outdoor News, fishing and outdoors for our area. Acadiana Mortgage, over 23 years in the mortgage business. Pelican Training and Consulting is an IWTP customized training provider with over 25 years of success to show for it. Call them for a free consultation today. Pelican Training and Consulting matches employers with 50-plus employees with training dollars. Smarter Geek, making technology easier. And the many supporters, donations, and folks sharing information and watching out for Bossier. Now, grab your popcorn and a drink. Here we go. This Bossier Watch live broadcast is brought to you by David B. Womack for all your contracting and construction needs. The Outdoor News, fishing and outdoors for our area. Acadiana Mortgage, over 23 years in the mortgage business. Pelican Training and Consulting is an IWTP customized training provider with over 25 years of success to show for it. Call them for a free consultation today. Pelican Training and Consulting matches employers with 50-plus employees with training dollars. Smarter Geek, making technology easier. And the many supporters, donations, and folks sharing information and watching out for Bossier. Now, grab your popcorn and a drink. Here we go. Holly, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, we hear you just great. Audio sounds perfect. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Holly, on short notice. There were a few folks that spoke, and you were one of them. And Lee Jeter, there was another fellow with the NAACP, and then I think there was a doctor and yourself. And you had some pretty interesting comments. And Rex, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have a...
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, and you had some pretty interesting comments that were brought to my attention. I wasn't there, but yours jumped out at me the most. And what I'm told is that for the most part, you had a standing ovation, and everybody in the audience, like, cheered you on. What
I
could
was
you say
surprised.
at a boring redistricting meeting that could have fired people up so much?
I I I don't know. I mean, I think they probably just shared some of the frustration that I have, and so I think it was essentially. And I didn't realize they stood. I heard some people clapping, and I did have people come up to me afterwards to thank me for speaking. But I think it was about the time that I said it doesn't matter. We could have like 18 districts if they're not doing their job. It doesn't matter. You don't have the representation you need. And that's, pretty much how I feel. But I went to that meeting specifically to speak to maintaining at large seats because I don't feel like a blanket approach is good for our city.
So, what's your reasoning for being in support of the at-large councilman?
So, what I shared with the council was that I moved into back to Bossier City after losing my husband, and the the most inexpensive place that I could move in a short period of time happened to be a trailer park. It's the one that got hit really bad in the tornado recently in South Bossier because I was moving based on the school district. I literally went to a couple of different places to figure out where I was going to go put my daughter in school moving back after losing my husband. And so when I looked at who my reps were being, moved back in, I think it was in Bossier Now, there was an article where the candidates were interviewed. And Irwin, this is the time that Cheatham was running, and Irwin in this interview literally said his greatest political accomplishment was that he kept a trailer park from being built in South Bossier. And it infuriated me. Um, it just made me mad. So what I explained to the council was, this is what I had. This is who my rep was. So do you think I felt represented? Absolutely not. In addition to that, what I have seen of this council, and I explained, I can't come to the meetings because you don't have them at times that are conducive for anyone with a regular job. So I watch them all on YouTube. And it's incredible to me the way that you speak to the citizens of this town. It's insulting. And not only that, the way the councilmen speak to each other. And I said, I don't know what you guys are doing. Like, if there are walking quorums, because you never talk about anything, you shut it down. You're not shopping. It's always been this way. This is how it's going to be. And so, who feels like they have it? But at least with an at large, you have a shot. You have three chances, basically. You've got your rep, and then you've got your other two at large if you want to try to get something done. And so, and before I said all of that, I even asked, I said, I'm going to make a statement. I have some questions. One, I want you to talk about the impetus behind this today. They didn't address that. And then I said, because Jeter had asked Bubba, I don't know if he asked him directly or if he was just asking the council, basically kind of where they stood on things. And Bubba was like, I'm not going to tell you what my vote is. You Tuesday, that'll be my vote. So I said, what are you basing this on? Have you talked to the citizens? Like, what are you guys basing this decision on? And so the only councilman that spoke, because they weren't all there, it was half empty, but Chris spoke to what a day in the life of an at-large was and explained that to the people, which I found reassurance in. And Bubba's response was, well, there's nothing wrong with living in a trailer park. I represent some of those. I have some clients that have those. And that was it. And it just I finally spoke up because I feel like if I don't, I don't have the right to complain about it. I can sit at home and I can complain, or I can, make my voice heard. And that's what I was trying to do. And what I was surprised at was the majority of the people who were there, it's my understanding, were actually the ones in favor of the redistricting, supported what I had to say. So it was a little ironic, but I think people just share the sentiment of the it is the good old boy network, and it has been that way, and it doesn't matter how you break it down. Um, if they're not good, then you're still not going to have representation.
Well, good for you. I mean, first thing is actually going to a meeting. I mean, that's 10 steps ahead of most of us. And number two, for speaking up and, sharing very clearly what your thoughts were. And then, of course, number three is, taking the chance to come on this show. and again,
Right.
and again, speaking your piece, and letting folks know what you think as a, tax-paying Bossier City citizen. That's what it's all about. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
But
I
but do I
can't.
feel like it's actually going to make a difference? No.
Uh,
Not, I mean, I did see Chris's post that, he had not been reached out to or contacted, and that's, it's we talked a little bit about this, but I kind of feel like, especially I'm third generation Bossier, and I've lived all over the country. But I'm back here, and everybody knows how Bossier politics works. I mean, they just do, except the new ones who come here. And I don't think the city does a good enough job of sharing who their reps are. Like the website for our city is horrible. If you go to look like who your rep is, you don't know what they stand for, what their positions, or just anything. But I think those of us who've been here for a long time kind of know how things go. And you get to a point where you feel like, what does it matter? What does it matter? And that was my point with the guys or gentlemen yesterday when I spoke. What does it matter if I come up here and speak my mind? Because you're not going to listen to me. And, Joyner said that the meeting would be recorded. I haven't seen where it was anywhere, so I have questioned to the councilman and mayor who were not in attendance. How will you even know what was shared at that meeting yesterday and where the citizens stand that did take the time to get up and speak?
Now, you come across to me as being, just a regular citizen. And
I am.
and I don't mean that in a demeaning way, but
Right.
I think you are representative of the majority of folks out there. You're not political. You don't go and play in the political game all the time, and you finally gotten to a point to where you spoke your mind. Would you agree or disagree that you this is the haves and the haves nots? Is it about race or is it not about race? Because some people I think were there about race, but you were there about the haves and the have nots, right?
Correct. Correct. I mean, 100%, I believe there are still racial issues in our city, as there are in every city in the nation. Unfortunately, there will continue to be, um, at some level. But no, I wasn't there because of that, and I don't think that that's going to make a difference. To be candid with you, I truly don't believe that. I think if our at-large seats are taken away, then we run the risk of whoever those 2 reps are for those new 2 districts getting sucked into the game that's being played right now with our current council members, and things continuing to be the way that they always have, and not having that chance of, sometimes you just have people you don't click with. And so, and I think Chris even mentioned that there may be a personality clash. That wasn't my issue with Irwin. Mine was 100% disrespect. Um, so I didn't feel like my voice mattered to him. And it's interesting because I called him one time and he didn't call me back until I mentioned it on Facebook. And once I mentioned it on Facebook that I did not get a call back, then all of a sudden I got a call that said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't, checked my voicemail and whatever." So my point with that is you have a shot with with at large if you don't connect with your rep. If you take that away with 7 districts, you just don't, and that doesn't mean it's going to make things better.
Yeah, it's a valid argument, and I got to say, I lean towards your side on maintaining the at-large candidates. Even though one of them's, well, he's not really my favorite politically, but he's great
Yeah.
entertainment and fodder for the show. So from that
Right.
perspective, I really actually like King David. But yeah, I pretty much lean towards your side, and I don't think I honestly don't think race is the biggest issue as well. I agree with you that there still are some racial issues, but I think that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem
Mhm.
is adequate, like you said, adequate representation. They don't want to do anything about anything or change their ways until it gets blasted on Facebook. Thank God for social media.
Right. And I think that's I do think that I can see and understand. And I did say, I think I opened with, I'm not opposed to change when I spoke. I can see how someone would not feel represented um, as a minority. I can completely understand that. But I don't think it is because that someone of a minority race could not run and win as in the districts that we're in now. I think it is just we have to fix what we have now and make it work before we make all these changes, because if you take what's going on with redistricting across the country, which is why I asked the question, what's the impetus? I wanted to hear from our council. Well, this is basically being forced on us because this is coming up all over the country in redistricting. So if if we
To,
fix what
to,
we have first, then
no,
we
no,
can look at it. But
you go ahead. Go ahead.
a blanket approach is not going to fix our situation, period. And I think that's why people don't feel represented, because the council is condescending and insulting, and they think we're just stupid citizens who don't have a right to really say anything because we just don't understand. And it's apparent through not only the language that they use with people who speak. And I mean, Settle doesn't have a stellar reputation, I get it, but it doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter. He shouldn't be spoken to the way that he was. And so I can see it intimidating other people to not be able to speak their voice, or feel like if they do, it's not going to matter. So
Two points. Burgess Owens. Burgess Owens. Do you know what percent? I mean, he a black man in a majority white district. Do you know what the percentage of whites in his district are? It's over 70%. And
yeah,
tell me racism is a factor. So to that point, the other point is that I think I think in Bossier, this argument for minority districts, I think you might open a can of worms that you may not want. Has anybody considered the percent of Hispanic population that's in Bossier now? If Go ahead.
well, I was going to say Joyner actually spoke to that last night, and he said when he was explaining kind of, and I wish it was recorded so that you could hear, because another point, he said the Hispanics kind of group together more, and they're not as spread out. Also in these numbers, he included, and he said he had to, I don't know where the had to came from, but children are included in these numbers for redistricting maps. I personally don't feel like that it should be that way. And especially if you look at our city and the rate of the children who leave. Like right now, as our city stands, and this is going to sound bad, but this is how I feel. I don't feel like my daughter, who will graduate in December, has a great future in Bossier. I just don't. I'm staying here with her to, and also to take care of my mother who's here, be close to her to help her. But when I think of the opportunities that are available in our city versus some of the others that we've lived in, I want her to have the best opportunities. And so I don't want her limited to here, and I don't feel like it's there's a ton of them here. So why are we including children in these counts also? Like how many are leaving as soon as they get out? That doesn't make sense to me, and it wasn't really explained very well. Maybe Lisa could share her thoughts on it, because she did ask from the seats. She asked questions about the population numbers and the numbers of the maps that he had.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I forget who it was pointed out that, well, they didn't spell Jimmy Davis right on the map. But anyway,
Right.
I
that's
think I think I think Lisa asked where was the most population growth in Bossier City.
Yeah,
Wasn't
that's what
that?
she said.
Do you recall the answer?
I just remember him talking about well, he said, I wrote down some notes in the beginning. He said our population had increased by about 1,800, but the largest increase has been outside of the city limits. And he explained that we were like a dumbbell, and that the growth explosion is the North and South Bossier, and then Barksdale was kind of the like center of the dumbbell, and that's where the population's going.
so it sounds to
Lisa,
me like there was some some very interesting information shared at that meeting. I'm assuming you learned quite a bit.
I did, and he did not. They did not initially have the stats up on the city, but she said that she would upload all of his numbers that he had behind the maps to the city website. I didn't see those today, but maybe I just missed them.
Duke, what
Now,
were you going to say?
Lisa, we know you're watching, but I think Joyner reported that District 1 in South Bossier, as it stands in the current city of Bossier, had the most growth. Is that correct or incorrect? Well, don't text and drive, obviously.
Yeah, Lisa just said, let me put this up on the screen. Lisa said, Duke, I am here, but driving to Baton Rouge, I have 2 meetings. Yeah, don't do the whole text and drive thing. A, you might get a ticket. B, it's a little dangerous.
The point I was going to make is if District 1 in South Bossier is in fact the fastest growing, that's all the more reason for us to have bungee jumping off the Jimmy Davis Bridge.
Yes. Hey, so we need to ask Holly. Holly, have you ever bungee jumped?
I have not, but I'm all in if it happened.
That's all I need to hear. You're my favorite guest now.
I did see Lisa just popped up the comment that you put on there that it was the census that he had to count the children, but he also mentioned that children are considered disenfranchised voters when you are doing these districting maps, which
What?
I don't agree with either.
Wait
That's
a
what he
minute.
said. He said
That
children are considered disenfranchised voters for the purposes of these redistricting maps.
So that would be interesting to look at the demographics and the birth rates across the various ethnicities and all that through the city. That's very interesting as well. I was not aware of
Mhm.
that. I'm learning a lot on this show.
I
Yeah.
see Elon Musk coming soon.
Okay. So is there anything else that you would like to share from the meeting? Anything else that you feel that, the folks watching should know? Because we got about 100 people watching right now.
I just hope that people share not so much my frustration, but my kind of feeling of a call to action. Like the comments about, hey, you really need to be at the meetings because it matters. I get the I understand the frustration of feeling like things have just are going to continue to be how they are because these guys are doing, what they've always done. But I do believe that our voting numbers are so low, and it's so sad to me to see, just and it's also kind of comical because of some of the arrogance of some of the council members. I mean, they're really, really little fish. I don't think there's been more than like 3,000 votes for one of them, so they shouldn't be too arrogant about it. But I do hope that people, you know, get get active and do something, even if it's just emailing over and over and over your rep if you can't make it to the meetings. Because I think the reason on a national level that things have gotten how they are and our political climate is what it is because people just kind of got complacent, and if it didn't directly impact them on their daily basis, if it didn't touch them, then they didn't feel like they needed to be involved, and I'm guilty of that. But I'm not going to do that moving forward. I'm going to do whatever's necessary to make sure that Bossier is a place where I want my child to stay, not that I want to encourage her to leave to go somewhere else for better opportunity. And there's a lot of things that need to happen, for that, but you have to start somewhere. And so even if it's, 10 of us at a meeting next time and trying to push the new councilmen to try to do a resolution again to get the meeting changed. Or maybe we can get, questions submitted by citizens via, email before the meetings, just something so that they know we're listening and there is something that we can do. And that's about it.
Amen to that.
God bless you, Holly. I wish we could clone you.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
and
raising a daughter, so
well,
she'll
raise her to be like you. And let me just say this as well. You know, I always tell people that, look, it's taken decades, or I forget when Bossier was founded, but it's taken 100 and some odd years or whatever for Bossier to be in the shape that it is right now. It can't be fixed in a day, but it
Right.
starts with little things like you're doing, instead of just watching, going to the meeting, asking questions, coming on social media, interviewing with the news media, whether they publish it or not, those are steps that, while they're, seem small and you wonder if they're really worth it, they are worth it. And eventually it will pay off. You're welcome back on this show anytime, or if you go to a meeting and want to come share something with us, just reach out and let us know.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm so grateful that I stumbled on you guys sometime last year. I don't even remember how, but I love to watch on Tuesdays and when you do your Thursdays show. And it made me feel like I wasn't alone when I found your show. Like I actually found people that were, interested in these things and speaking about it. And so it's given me a little boost of confidence that I didn't have. So thank you guys for that.
Hey, the thanks all goes to you for doing your part as well. It's easy
Yes,
for us to
Holly.
get up here and preach.
Yeah, thank you for stepping up and going and speaking. I mean, hopefully, folks will, use you as an example and follow in your footsteps.
Well, thank you. I'm not done. I'm just getting started.
All right. Well,
Awesome.
we're glad to have you on. We'll go ahead and not to be rude, but we'll go ahead and disconnect you, and we'll move on to some other topics and all that. And again, you're welcome back anytime. Just reach out to us.
Thank you guys. Have a good one, and
All
I'll
right.
hop off and watch.
All right. Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you.
Holly.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I hear you guys are talking a little bit about our constitutional Second Amendment rights, and y'all need a little bit of input from the legislature.
Yeah, we would like a lot of input, a lot of positive input. Are you guys down there going to actually get anything done, or y'all just going to keep twiddling your thumbs?
Well, I can tell you this: we're out of Baton Rouge. We've been in 4 sessions this year, and I think we're best when we're home because we can't pass any laws that hurt folks back home. But that's a joke. I think the biggest issue is probably D.C. right now. Those Congress and the Senate, which are out there passing what looks like to be gun control bills. Now, I can tell you, if you look at the bill that's been passed by the Congress recently and by the Senate on the president's desk to be signed, there's some things that we can all agree upon. Defending our schools and providing protection to our children in our schools is a great thing. Investing in mental health is another great thing. I think we can all agree upon funding, enforcing the laws on the books and trying to put violent criminals in jail. But where we can agree upon and where law-abiding citizens in Louisiana and across this nation should have some issues is when we see our federal government start spending money on incentivizing red flag laws, which are unconstitutional and then don't give the proper due process. When we start seeing giving liberal attorney generals like Mr. Garland the opportunity to delay law-abiding citizens' rights to purchase a firearm, extending waiting periods, that time which is critical for an individual to defend themselves and their loved ones, as well as seeing some of these misdemeanors get added on to prevent a person from having their Second Amendment rights. We know that if you have a felon and you're violent, you lose your gun rights, but we never thought we'd see a spot in our nation where you could have a misdemeanor and lose your rights. And that bill was passed in the Senate with 15 Republicans joining block with Democrats, which is very disappointing. We had one of our own U.S. senators from Louisiana, from a very pro-Second Amendment state, support that legislation, to my disappointment. And then it was passed in the Congress, and now it's sitting on the president's desk, and he shows his intent to sign the bill. It's the first gun control bill in a number of years.
Well, and you're right. That is a shame, because what you always hear from those folks, and was it Duke, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Cassidy that voted for that?
Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah, Cassidy. That's a whole other conversation. But anyway,
Hey,
what
yeah,
you always
speaking-
hear is we need to do something. If we just do something. No, we've got plenty of laws on the books. Stop doing that.
And speaking
Well, look,
of
if you want to have,
Cassidy, speaking of Cassidy,
you're right. If you want to do something, start talking about how to strengthen law-abiding citizens' Second Amendment rights. We're never in a conversation where I say we, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I know you gentlemen are as well. We never have those conversations in D.C. about how to strengthen law-abiding citizens' rights to defend their loved ones or themselves. It's always conversations, how can we take away those individuals or weaken their Second Amendment rights? And all these laws that they pass won't actually stop any of these incidents that they're looking for. And we all know that a good guy with a gun always stops a bad guy with a gun. So why are we taking guns away from the good guys? Duke, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even know that you realize this, but prior to this weekend, Cassidy did a town hall, and I mean, look, it rang at my house, and my wife was like, "Hey, Cassidy's on the phone, going to do a town hall. You want to be on?" I was like, Oh, hell yeah, I want to be on it. And put me in the queue. I want to ask a question. I was standing there waiting on pins and needles. So I sat there and I listened through all the damn questions that he was taking. And it sounded like he wasn't taking questions, but from nothing but leftists, anti gun, take your gun leftists. He wasn't taking any question from any pro Second Amendment guy. I mean, this guy, he sold us all out. I'm sorry. I mean, and I'm not putting you on the spot, Blake, but the fact of the matter is Bill Cassidy sold us all out.
Well, Duke, you're not putting me on the spot. When I decided I wanted to run for elected office, I said I'd defend the Constitution. And I represent and be the voice of the people of Louisiana. And the voice of the people of Louisiana are we want people to defend our constitutional rights, our Second Amendment rights. And when I look at Senator Cassidy, I mean, he reminds me of an old Butch Cassidy. I mean, he tried to rob the Trump train without success a year or so ago after having Trump's endorsement on the campaign trail. Now he's trying to rob and run off with individuals and law-abiding individuals in Louisiana's Second Amendment rights. Is very concerning when you look at the fact that our U.S. Senator John Kennedy did not support the bill, and every one of our Republican congressional members, from Mike Johnson to Steve Scalise to Higgins to Graves, and to Miss Letlow, they all voted in opposition. But why does Senator Cassidy see a need in working across the aisle when National Democrats who support things like killing babies in the womb and taking away our Second Amendment constitutional rights and burning our cities and defunding police officers? Come on. We need people that are going to stand up for our Constitution, stand up for our country right now. We need strong Republicans. We don't need you working across the aisle with leftists like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. You're from Louisiana. We expect you to be the voice of Louisiana and do your job in Washington. That's the message from the folks back home.
Exactly correct.
Damn right.
Good short message. And here's the other thing too is any laws that are passed concerning guns at all or self-defense rights or anything like that are only to either A, take away more rights, or B, to try to give back rights that have already been taken away. We don't need 40,000 laws on the books across the federal and the state governments about guns. We just don't. And the right to self-defense. And I would like to clarify, too, so that everybody is aware, and if you read the Bruin decision, they spell it out pretty clearly there as well, that the Second Amendment does not give us the right to do this. It protects that right, and it is actually, as we all know, a check and balance on the federal government. And I think that Cassidy has got his wires crossed. He apparently must have tripped and fell and hit his head or something silly, and he doesn't understand how it should work now.
Well, there's been a lot of bad news, and I know we're frustrated with what Congress has been doing, but mainly controlled by Democrats, and some of these Republicans are empowering Democrats to have even more power over our Second Amendment and other constitutional rights. But I can say I'm proud of the Supreme Court this past week on the issue of gun rights with the New York law that they struck down, which, the law in New York for decades, I think it's a century-old law now, that says that an individual had to show proper cause as to why that individual needed a right to carry a firearm to defend themselves. So, the rich and the elite that have jewelry shops or that have a lot of money that need to protect it, those individuals that get the right to defend themselves. But the normal everyday guy or everyday lady couldn't show proper cause to defend herself. And we know the Constitution provides equal protection under the law. And the Second Amendment doesn't see gender. It doesn't see color. It just sees law-abiding U.S. American citizens, and it's all of our rights together. And I'm proud that on a 6-3 decision that the U.S. Supreme Court knocked down that law. It's been one of the most powerful decisions since the Heller case about 12 years ago, which defined the Second Amendment as a right to defend yourselves and your loved ones. But now we're understanding that everybody has that right. And I think the Justice Clarence Thomas led on that issue. And if you go back and read his opinion, he had some pretty powerful words as comparing the Second Amendment to some of the other constitutional rights and how it's so important to defend those.
Yeah, and one other interesting thing, too, that not a lot of people realize is the McDonald decision in 2010, which said that the right was applied against the state and local governments. Most people don't realize that McDonald in that case was a black fella, too, by the way. And so this isn't just, a bunch of white folks that want their guns kind of thing at all. And I would argue, I wouldn't even have to argue it, I could pull up some proof pretty easily, that a lot of the gun control laws were enacted during the Reconstruction period and all that. And they were enacted specifically to try to get the guns out of the hands of the newly freed slaves. And I know I'm going way off on a tangent here, but I just don't understand how people forget all that.
You make some great points, and not just the time of newly freed slaves. We fast forward ourselves into this century and looking at the Jim Crow era laws. I know the National Rifle Association pushed very hard in Louisiana. I authored some legislation that was able to strengthen preemption law, which basically said that if you want to pass any type of gun law, it has to be on the state level and not the local level. You never want to put yourself in a situation where you're creating a patchwork of laws per parish, where a law-abiding citizen from Shreveport or Bossier or New Iberia, where I live, could leave and go to Orleans Parish and all of a sudden become a criminal because he didn't follow the local ordinances. If it's a good law, whether it's pro-gun or anti-gun, that should be debated at the state level. And a lot of these old laws on the books, particularly there's one still in play in Orleans, was to keep African Americans who are open carrying on the streets to protest police brutality at the times. This goes back to the Black Panthers and some of those historic times. And most African Americans in Louisiana are in the Democratic Party, which doesn't stand for our Second Amendment rights. And I ask those individuals to read history, study history. The Republicans were the ones that supported freeing slaves. Republicans are the ones that supporting your Second Amendment constitutional rights. So why are you registered as a Democrat? Because these individuals have historically not supported your constitutional rights. And I just think people need to open up the history books and read a little bit and see where we've come, and you'll know where we're going with all this.
Yeah, I agree. And let me give you one other quick history reminder, too, that will probably get a bunch of rocks thrown at me by my Republican friends, is what Democrats basically started gun control in the state of California, right?
I do. I know who it is.
Somebody,
he's a great president, but that's one of his negatives about him.
Somebody named President Ronald Reagan, and it was specifically against the open carry of the Black Panthers. And from that little deal, we've ended up where we are in California, New Jersey, and all these other places. But I digress.
Now,
look, I'd like to give your listeners a little update on where we are in the state level. I know we've been talking about national politics, but there was some things happening at the Capitol where I serve in the Baton Rouge that dealt with Second Amendment rights, if y'all are interested in hearing about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when you give us that update, Blake, I want to talk a little bit about some discrimination down there at the Capitol.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like we can have an interesting conversation about that. But real quick on the Second Amendment, we tried really hard to get this constitutional carry moving for the last few years, and we were able to pass it last year. And that basically says that if you are a law-abiding citizen, you don't need government permission or to pay any types of fees or get any type of special training to carry a firearm to defend yourselves. Look, in Louisiana, open carry is perfectly legal. What's the big difference about wearing a jacket or hiding your firearm? Personally, practically, as a gun owner myself, I like individuals to conceal their firearms. I don't want them carrying them out in the open, although they have a right to. I prefer concealed carry because the old ladies, at Walmart in public, it doesn't get them upset as much. And you're only supposed to use that firearm when you actually need it to defend yourself. Otherwise, you don't want anybody knowing you have it. Plus, it acts as a great deterrent for criminals. They don't know who's armed. They just assume everybody's armed. So that bill was vetoed by the governor last session. It didn't make it through the process this go around, but we were able to get a small step in the right direction as the bill from Senator Jay Morris from North Louisiana. And it basically gives the constitutional carry rights to active and former military, those vets out there that, the governor was making a contention that, we need training for these things. Well, who's better trained than our military and our veterans? I mean, they've been trained, they've gone to war, most of them fought for our country, sacrificed. They should have these rights to defend themselves back on their homeland that they fought and they love. And we were able to pass that into law. So if you're a law-abiding citizen and you're over the age of 21 and you're active military or former veteran, as of whenever that law goes into place, I think it's August 1st, or it could be on the signature of the governor. And it was just recently signed. You're going to have the right to have constitutional carry in Louisiana. Hopefully that's the first step in the right direction to getting more rights. I also passed some legislation that's called the Louisiana Firearm Safety Awareness Act. And I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and I studied the fact that state police was collecting around $4.5 million a year of revenue from concealed carry permit holders, but they're only spending around $2.5–3 million to run the program. I think the rest of that money was going into their general fund to use for other things. Well, I said, well, why not take some of that money, invest it into a program that's going to make our firearms community in our streets safer? So for a small portion of that $20,000 of the fiscal note, we're going to require state police to have the concealed carry curriculum, the gun safety curriculum that shows accident prevention, that shows conflict resolution, how to safely handle a firearm. They're going to put that online in different videos, eight videos, 15 minutes long, with a whole outline of curriculum at no cost to Louisiana citizens. I mean, that's a step in the right direction just to make our community safer. We also had a bill that dealt with individuals, veterans that had PTSD from going to war, and they just thought they were in a mental state that maybe they shouldn't have a firearm. They recognized it, where they could actually take their firearms and turn them into a local federal firearms dealer. And when they thought that, you know, their mental situation was right, we're talking about this voluntarily turning them over. They could come back to the federal firearms license dealer, get their guns back, and it would basically give a limitation liability to those dealers that wanted to help these vets out holding these firearms while they're going through some of these mental challenges, trying to seek help and rehabilitation. So that's just a small overview of some of the legislation, gun legislation we had in the state capitol that all got passed and signed into law just recently over the last month.
That's good. I mean, look, thank goodness we have leaders like you when it comes to our Second Amendment rights. I know that, you know, you do a lot of other stuff on a lot of other issues as well. But, you know, after talking with you this weekend, there's one issue that kind of came to mind. And Rex, if you'll go to that cut from this weekend, there's one that I want to raise and I want to get your comment on, Blake. So I was wondering, how tall are you, Blake?
I'm 6 foot tall. That's an easy question. I thought tough was coming.
That is exactly what I was wondering. You know, the first time I came to Baton Rouge and I came down to the legislature, and I can't remember what representative it was, but Representative Henry Burns introduced me to a legislature down there, and it was one of the times that I was going to run, and he says, man, I am glad to see you down here. He says, I have been fighting discrimination down here for the past 2 terms, and I can't get nothing done. He said, this is what he says to me, Blake. He says, I've been fighting to get the urinals lowered for us normal people. And he said, I just ain't had no success. So I'm wondering if you can report if the Capitol has addressed the disparity in the height of the urinals down there.
Yeah, I've got Representative Rick Edmonds working on that one. I guess he's got a great center of gravity just like yourself. He's working on that, but most of us, you know, we don't have an issue with that. But I can understand would that be an issue. But look, if you want, you can always go to the ladies' bathroom. There's one dedicated for that. That's a whole different set of issues.
Yeah.
Oh no!
These days, who knows?
I'm not into that LGBTQT whatever that all. I don't know all them letters. That's off limits for me, brother. But hey, I can take a joke.
Well, guy, I appreciate you being such a good sport about it, and the reason why I threw Representative Rick Edmonds in there. He's a good friend, a good conservative, Christian, fighting for all the right issues. But you know, every once in a while, you just kind of have a little bit of fun and crack some jokes with your buddies in Baton Rouge. If you know, you got to have fun while you're there. And you're right. We are very passionate about these issues. I'm passionate about the Second Amendment, but I'm also passionate about protecting lives in the womb. I'm also passionate about fighting tax increases and keeping government small and holding government accountable. And that's what I do on the Appropriations Committee. And I know a lot of individuals get upset with the folks in Baton Rouge, but I'll tell you, the numbers are growing for individuals like myself that want to do the right thing, that want to be the voice of the people back home. And we just need the help from the folks back home to keep electing good conservative candidates that can really serve your interests and stop electing these career politicians to send to Baton Rouge or to send to Washington. And we can change our state and improve it for our future over the next decade.
Amen.
Hey,
to
Blake,
that.
Blake, we got to squeeze them, right? Down at the local level, we got to vet them. Is that not truth? I mean, when people are running for office, I mean, the voters, you're the ones that's got to do it. They have to get up there and they have to squeeze them and press them on these issues and find out where they really stand. right? Isn't that how we do it? Isn't that
That's
what we
right.
need to
Look,
do?
our school boards are more important than ever now. I mean, the Republican Party's having training sessions just to make sure we get the right folks on our school boards because of all these crazy curriculums that are coming out that the far left, woke left, is trying to put and instill upon our kids to brainwash them. So you're right. We need to vet these candidates at the local level, but we also need to stay involved as these legislators or these candidates get elected to office and what they're doing while they're in Baton Rouge. They've got to hear from folks back home. Look, we're looking at a potential override session right now. If no one from back home calls, we won't go into an override session. But if folks back home care about things like transparency in government, their health freedoms, letting violent criminals repeat offend and get out of jail early, or protecting our law enforcement, just a number of issues. I think there's 29 big Republican bills the governor just vetoed. If you care about those things, let your legislators know that you want to go into a veto override session and override this governor.
Yeah,
What's that?
we preach all the time on the show that people need to get more involved and they need to let their voices be heard. That's step number one.
That's right.
All right, Duke, got anything else we want to go over?
No, Blake, we appreciate you coming on the show real quick. I mean, I know Second Amendment issues you're like a moth to the flame, and but hey, don't be a stranger. It was good seeing you down in Baton Rouge this weekend, and I think it was productive. I think that Dinesh spoke well. I mean, I think I think it motivated a lot of people. What did you think?
Yeah, and to correct that was Lafayette. That was my home area over there, and we had the first state convention. It was called Victory 2022 for the Republican Party. They hadn't had one in over a decade, and I can tell you, I was excited to be there. We had a lot of great breakout sessions, a lot of great individuals exchanging thoughts, and a lot of the common ground was let's figure out how to win in 2022 with the red wave. Let's figure out how to get our governor's office back and have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate in 23. And I thought the event was successful. They had to have over 1,000 people there, a lot of vendors, a lot of candidates running for office. We need to do it again next year. It was great seeing you there. The red wave's coming, Duke, and we're looking forward to it.
Amen, brother. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the show tonight, and we'll do it again soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, and God bless your listeners, and God bless the great state of Louisiana. We will improve this state. We just got to get your help back home to elect some good candidates and a good governor. And like I said, we get 10 years, we can get this state off the bottom and make it better for our children and hopefully keep our children from moving out to other states. So God bless your listeners. God bless Louisiana. Call anytime. I'm happy to be on the show. Come back in the future.
Thanks a lot, Blake. Appreciate
Amen,
it.
brother. Take care.
Well, I can hear you, and I can hear you, and I'm hoping that you can hear me.
I can hear you, Duke. Can you hear Chris? And more importantly, everybody watching, let us know in the comments, can y'all hear Chris?
Got him loud and clear. So now Chris Alexander, rumor has it that you're the runt of another little Alexander guy running around North Louisiana, and somehow there's this connection, but you're the runt of the two. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
Well, it's accurate, but he's been whooping me my whole life. But he won't come down here now because he knows if he does, I can whip him now. So now he just won't. Now he just won't show up.
Brotherly love, gotta love it.
So for all of our viewers that may not realize this or not, and to connect the dots, Chris Alexander is the brother of one Royal Alexander, who a lot of you folks from North Louisiana I know are familiar with. And more importantly, Chris, to hat tip to you and all of your family. I mean, your parents obviously raised a good family. You guys got a pretty prestigious award down in Lafayette here. What has it been, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, that's right. We were down there at the Republican Victory Convention in Lafayette, and my mom and my dad posthumously were awarded a pro-life award there for all the work that my mom and dad did going back many, many years right there in Shreveport for the pro-life movement. In fact, our mom started the first pro-life pregnancy referral center right there in Shreveport and helped out a lot of young girls over many years. And it was a real honor for her, and my mom is almost 90 now and still hanging in there and really could still whip all of us. And she's just a great, great lady. And it was really great to be up on the stage with her while she received that award. It wasn't about me or about any of our siblings. It was about my mom and my dad, because they worked in the trenches for many, many, many years. And I think it was just, wasn't really coincidental. I think it was providential that my mom happened to receive that award 2 days after Roe v. Wade was reversed. And I think God has a way of doing things.
Well, I got to tell you, just I've somewhat followed your family. Obviously, I've been closer to Royal than any of your other siblings, but I got to tell you, I didn't know that was going to be happening, and I literally was kind of sitting in the back of the room and taking it in, and it gave, I got to tell you, it gave me a chill. I mean, I was just impressed to be able to call y'all friends. I mean, it just.
Well, that means a lot to me for you to say that. I really, really appreciate that. It means more to me than you realize. And God bless you for saying that. And my mom and dad never really sought any kind of accolades or any kind of awards for anything. They never really wanted attention. They just wanted to try to help the unborn and to help young girls who found themselves in situations of distress, And so we're just blessed to have been a part of that.
Well, now, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rex.
Oh, no, that's fine. But I was just letting y'all know that I've been working on this letter that was sent out. So when we get ready to start talking about that, I'll be able to queue up parts of the letter that Chris sent out, and it starts, "Dear friends," and goes right into talking about some of our local politicians. So when y'all get ready, I'll pull that letter up.
But before you do that, Rex, I have to wish Duke a happy anniversary, and I'll join in your sentiment that I'm somewhat shocked that apparently a very patient and forbearing woman has been putting up with him for 25 years. So God bless your marriage, and God bless your wife, Duke.
Well, thank you. And little secret to everybody: fishing does wonders. It does. I mean, a lot of you guys, y'all with your fancy pants, you want to get roses and all that stuff. Take her fishing. I mean, that's the secret.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Duke. Yeah, that might work. That might work for y'all. But if I were to do that to my wife were mad at me, and I said, "Look, I'll make it up to you by taking you fishing," she'd probably shoot me on the spot. So that's kind of a case by case. That's a case by case analysis there, Duke.
I got you. Well, look, you are an old chip off of the block from your parents, and doing good work. You're up to some good work going on right now. I mean, I think you've got a new group that you're working with, or tell us about what you're doing and how we come to have you on the show tonight.
Well, Duke, we went down to the legislature. We've been down there for about 2 years now, going and watching what happens down there. And I got some very direct exposure to exactly how some of these legislators operate and what they do and how they kill good bills and how they advance bad bills and how, more importantly, how they do it in a way that is often very hard to detect. And so we said, we have to do something about this because these Republicans down here, some of these liberal Republicans are down here killing really, really good legislation and advancing bad legislation. And they're going back up to different places in Louisiana, like North Louisiana, and talking to their constituents about what great Republicans and patriots they are. And I said, that's just bold-faced lying. And we have to show and expose this. And nobody's fighting for Louisiana citizens down here. They're all fighting for the big special interests, and we have to do something about this. And so we formed LCAG. It's Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, and it is simply a citizen advocacy organization that monitors legislation and basically exposes Republicans who are undermining good constitutional legislation. and revealing it meticulously, like the way they kill things in committee, like the way Representative Thomas Presley did on 3 separate bills down here, and the way Barrow Peacock very feebly refused to support a veto override session. What a very, very weak man. What a very, very weak leader for him to do that. And again, I don't know these people personally, and frankly, I'm sure they're decent human beings, but I did see I personally observed what they did in the legislature with my own eyes, and our own team did, and their constituents have a right to know exactly what they did. And it was some things that I thought were very, very objectionable and did a profound disservice to the citizens of Louisiana this past session. So that's mainly what I'm called to talk about: Barrow Peacock and Thomas Presley. People need to know.
Well, let's, we have a lot of politicians that come on the show, and we take a lot of shots at politicians, and we talk specifics on a lot of bills and different things over the years. Not so much here lately, but specifically, let's talk about, some specific examples and how that is important to people watching the show. Like there's one in particular that seems pretty simple to me. I think it was HB 594. Wasn't that the bodily autonomy bill? Is that one of the ones on your list of bills?
That is the bodily autonomy bill. That's exactly right, Duke. And it was it was an extraordinarily important bill. I mean, it was so profoundly important in light of the draconian actions of our governor, acting in conjunction with the Department of Health and the CDC, just the oppressive hand that they put down on citizens of Louisiana regarding COVID and the vaccine and all the misinformation that they put out there. And he had a really good opportunity to stand up and with his authority and power and basically slap him in the face and say, you know what? You destroyed a lot of people's lives. You hurt a lot of people through despotic decrees that were not based in science, through abuse of your authority. And many people not only suffered then, but are continuing to suffer because of that. And HB 594 was a great bill from Representative Amadei that was simply designed to address that issue and establish once and for all, statutorily in Louisiana, that people have core bodily autonomy. And we have the fundamental right to make our own health care decisions, and the government has no right getting between me and my doctor, period. And it was a very, very great bill. It included a penalty provision, and it also, that was 1022. But the bottom line is it went before the committee, and it was killed in committee by Representative Presley and Representative Bagley, who's also a Republican, Representative McMahon, and Representative Turner. It failed in committee 11-5. This straightforward bill would simply told Governor Edwards, no, every Louisiana citizen has the right to decide their own medical choices, period. It's a core constitutional requirement. You'd think every conservative constitutional Republican in the entire state of Louisiana would support this bill. But it was killed by 4 Republicans in the Health and Welfare Committee. It failed 11-5, and it would have passed 9-7 if these weak Republicans had supported it. And Thomas Presley opposed it. I think that is reprehensible in light of the history of abuse that the people of this state have experienced under this governor. He had an absolute obligation to stand up on this bill, and he failed.
Well, so here's the inevitable question, not to interrupt you there, Duke. Here's the inevitable question, Chris, is why? I mean, I know you can't necessarily get inside of Presley's head, but did he seem to give any kind of justification for his, and I would agree with you, for his wrong vote and stance on this legislation?
Well, Not that I am aware of. To be honest with you, I feel like it's one of the bills where he didn't offer too much of an explanation, and I'll curious as I mean, doesn't it beg the question? Who is he beholden to, Duke? I mean, who's he beholden to? I mean, I know that in committee on this bill, I went back and looked at the committee notes on 594, and it's going through committee. Representative Presley Barrow-Amade is sitting right in front of him explaining the bill to the committee. It's a good bill. Presley doesn't ask one question. He doesn't say one word. He doesn't ask or suggest anything about how the bill might be improved if he has a problem with it. He just sits there, says absolutely nothing. He expresses no sympathy or empathy for the citizens of Louisiana who've suffered at the hands of this governor and this oppressive Department of Health, or why a bill like this might be needed. He says absolutely nothing. He's sitting there like a potted plant. And then when it comes down to vote, he doesn't do anything except vote no. And that's not leadership. That is not leadership for the citizens of Louisiana. That's not what the people of his district voted for. If the people of Thomas Presley's district knew that he had an opportunity to codify in law a core constitutional freedom, which is bodily autonomy, we have a choice over our own medical decisions, and he failed to act on that, I'm sorry, but that's a problem. That's a big problem if you're going back home and telling people what a good conservative you are.
So, that why question that Rex asked, and I want to run this by you, someone suggested to me that on this bill, a lot of folks may have voted against, citizens being able to have the right to determine their own healthcare decisions. I mean, it blows my mind that these guys would not let people make their own decision. But I mean, they said the bill included all vaccines, and one specific example somebody said was well, we don't want to go having to fight polio again. But my argument to that was go ahead.
Dude, that is absolute nonsense. You know what a red herring is? That's an absolute red herring. We all have natural immunity in this country to polio now. 99% of this country is vaccinated from polio. That's complete nonsense. And it doesn't change the fact that if he had an issue with that, you know what he could have done? You know what Thomas Presley could have done? He could have sat there and said, Representative Amade, I understand that the spirit of this bill, behind this bill, is the fact that people have been oppressed over COVID and all the disaster that has caused. Why don't you just specify in the bill the COVID vaccine? In light of the fact that the science disproves it, that 99.9% of the people who come in contact with COVID are unaffected by it. The symptoms are generally mild. You don't know you have it. So, yeah, there's a compelling reason for the government not to ever be able to compel someone to get this vaccine. But he didn't do that. He sat up there and said nothing and voted against a bill that, at least in spirit, was very needed, even if he could have suggested an amendment or two. My point here is that he showed no leadership, none. He killed a bill that was thoughtful and that was expressing the overwhelming frustration of citizens across Louisiana regarding the way that our governor and this government has responded to this pandemic, and he did nothing. That's my point.
Well, let me throw this out there as food for thought, too. So if he, of course, I didn't watch any of the video or anything like that, of the proceedings, but if he didn't ask any questions at all or have any commentary or input to that, then it sounds like he definitely had his mind made up when he went in to vote, or he just randomly decided to, vote against it. So if he went in there with his mind made up, then that sounds like somebody else had already convinced him, to vote against this bill, and I'm not going to accuse him of something that I can't say for sure, but a lot of times that's when special interests have come in beforehand. We've seen this over and over again with politicians, and, just grease the wheels to make him vote one way or the other. I'm not saying that's what he did because I don't know, but we've seen that before with lots of political issues.
Right, Duke. Look, the bottom line is what he did is far more important, in my opinion, than why he did it. Although why he did it is interesting, and there's a number of different possibilities there. Perhaps he got maybe Shakedown Schexnayder spoke to him and said, I need you to oppose this bill or whatever. Perhaps it was a lobby, someone in the pharmaceutical industry. I don't know who his donors are. We haven't drilled deep down into that yet, but we're going to, and we're going to find out exactly why he did what he did. But the bottom line is, one thing that's indisputable, one thing that is not subject to any kind of dispute, is that arguably we're looking here, 594, arguably when it comes to bodily autonomy and individual sovereignty that's guaranteed under the Constitution, arguably the most important bill that came before him this entire session was this bill, 594 by Amity, that we will make our own medical decisions and government get off our backs. You don't have a right to be in our lives on this stuff. And he failed us. I don't know. And again, Duke, to your question, was it out of weakness? Was it out of corruption? I don't have any idea. And frankly, that's of less concern to me than his constituents being able to know what he did.
Well, on some of these other bills, and I'll for you to say, I want you to segue into some of those other bills and explain those bills, and I guess you could say cohorts that opposed good legislation, and saying that, you said something just a second ago. You said lobby. Are you saying that lobby is, actively, opposing people having the right to be able to choose whether or not to be vaccinated or not? Did they take an active role on some of these bills?
Well, Duke, I'll tell you, I don't know if it was on 594 or 1022. I can't exactly remember, but it was on 1022. Y'all want to talk about 1022?
Yeah,
we can talk about 1022, because this was a bill that was so important, and it was it basically said that the government, no entity can mandate that any Louisiana citizen take any product for which the manufacturer of that product is immune from any kind of civil liability. So basically, you sell me something and it's defective and it's bad and it causes real harm to me, and you're the one who made it. And the reason why it harmed me or my family was because you made it in a defective way. But I don't get to sue you for your negligence. Yet you get to order me to take it. Okay? That's what 1022 was designed to prohibit. It basically said that if the person who makes the product cannot be sued if they're shielded from liability while they're making millions and millions of dollars off of this, but they can't be sued if it messes somebody up, guess what? Nobody gets to force a Louisiana citizen to take it. Doesn't that sound pretty fair to you, Duke? Doesn't that sound like a pretty fair piece of legislation? And it also, the bill created a cause of action if in fact someone did have to take a product, a vaccine or any product, and it harmed them, and the manufacturer of that product was immune from liability, guess what? It would have created a cause of action where the person who took it could sue whoever forced them to take it, whether it was an employer or an administrator, whoever it was, the state of Louisiana, the government, whatever, they could sue them for that. Presley opposed that bill, and he opposed it vocally on the floor of the chamber. It made it to the House floor and it was defeated there. And for that reason, right now, if someone is forced to take a vaccine or any kind or anything by the government or an employer, whoever it is, and it really messes them up, guess what? They can't sue the manufacturer and they can't sue the person who forced them to do it. So they could get to force someone to take a product or a vaccine, but the person has no recourse against them if the person who forced them to do it screws their lives up permanently. Presley opposed that bill, and it is absolutely reprehensible that he would have done that. And the reason why they had a manufacturer's representative down there and someone from the State Chamber of Commerce down there, and they were saying how this would create a litigious environment, and therefore they were opposed to it because it would create too many lawsuits. Guess what? Sorry, my friend, but if you force me to do something that hurts me or my family, and I don't get to sue you for damages over that, that's a huge problem. This bill would have clarified and taken care of that, and Representative Presley opposed it. That is reprehensible to me.
Now you 1022. I heard you did an interview with Louis Avallone and Stephen Parr on their show, and I think it was this bill that you were talking about, and you raised Blake Miguez up, and they either asked you a question and got you sidetracked, and you weren't able to finish that thought. Was Blake Miguez or what other representatives were kind of on the wrong side of that up here, or on the wrong side of this bill? Were you about to say that Blake Miguez was on the wrong side of this? Expand on that a little bit.
No, dude. What I was going to say, Blake Miguez. Well, I'm gonna have to shift gears on this for a second because Blake Miguez put forward a great bill, House Bill 811. And I know that you remember Zuckerberg and all the cash that he injected into the swing states up there, hundreds of millions of dollars directly into the coffers of those election officials in those swing states up there, and basically bought that election. He bought those election officials up with the dark money that he pumped into those the election process in those states. And so Blake Miguez, who's a very fine representative from what I've been able to see, brought forward a great bill which would have prohibited any election official, whether they're a registrar, a voter, clerk of court, commissioner of elections, from receiving any private money from any source for the ostensible purpose of conducting an election. It would have prohibited dark money in the Louisiana election process. It would have kept our elections completely clean. And Blake Miguez brought that forward. It made it through the House committee, the House, the Senate committee, and it got all the way to the Senate floor. And Duke, I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer. And who do you think in the Louisiana Senate killed that great bill that would have kept money, huge amounts of private dark money out of the Louisiana electoral process? Who do you think killed that?
I would have to say leadership.
It was leadership, and his name is Representative Blank Page Cortez, as my good friend Moon Griffon down here refers him. I don't get credit for the name, but it's very apt. So let me tell you what happened. It gets on the floor, okay? There's a point in the legislative session, Duke, at which the required votes go from a simple majority to a 2/3 majority in order to pass something. After 6 p.m., beginning on the second to last day, I believe it is, session, any bills put forward require no longer a simple majority vote. They require a 2/3 vote. And so that's a lot harder to get a bill passed, you would agree, if it gets to that point. So Blake Miguez's bill was down there day after day after day waiting to be called, and you've got to have the Senate president call the bills, right? You got to have it. If he doesn't call it, guess what? It's not getting heard. So Blank Page Cortez, the Republican leader of the Louisiana State Senate with the opportunity to pass a very, very important election integrity bill, the most important of the entire session, stands up there and delays it and delays it and delays it until a point where it no longer requires a majority of senators to pass. It now requires a 2/3. So he gets it to that point, and then he realizes that it's still going to pass even with 2/3. 2/3 of the Louisiana state senators want this bill, so he had to take it to another level. So he made sure that 2 of the senators that would have been there to pass it were not there. One had left the chamber and one had gone on vacation. The bill needed 26 votes to pass. It got 25 and it failed by 1 vote because of Paige Cortez, the Republican leader of the Senate. That's what he did, and now he wants to run for lieutenant governor on his conservative credentials. Do you see a problem with that? I do.
Well, the biggest problem I see is that most people who call themselves conservative, if you ask them, well, what does it mean for you to be a conservative? They really don't have a good answer. They just start going down some of the Republican Party planks or, the talking points and all that. But in reality, they're not what I would consider a true conservative. And let me bring up one other point for everybody to think about for a second. So we throw around the term, the acronym RHINO, Republican in name only, quite a bit. But the problem is, I would argue that being a RHINO tends to be the norm with people who are in the Republican Party. They're actually the norm when they should be the outcasts of it. But it doesn't look like they are. There's too many of them.
Yeah. Duke, was that Rex or Duke?
That was
Rex.
Okay. Rex, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. And the reason why they're allowed to fester is that people are not calling them out in the right way. I dare say that there are a whole lot of people in Representative Presley's district who are very offended by the heavy-handed actions of our governor, by the Louisiana Department of Health regarding this vaccine, and even the national government, without Anthony Fauci and so forth. It was just disastrous experience. And there's still a whole lot of people struggling in their jobs and their employment and their families regarding this vaccine. I've never seen a government engage in such tyranny with regard to a medical procedure as they did with this vaccine, and I guarantee you there are people in Thomas Presley's district who would want to know that he had opposed legislation like this that was very, very important. And by the way, Representative Beryl Amade is a very patriotic legislature, and she stood very courageously on a number of issues down there. She is just a great human being. But we just have to start basically calling them out. And by the way, guys, my group has decided that we're not going any more Republican Democrat. We're going globalist patriot. So the globalist, what used to be the D is now globalist. And what used to be the R is now patriot. Because Democrat and Republican, Duke, I think you may have alluded to that earlier, that don't mean that much anymore. And globalist and patriot, anybody who ties into the big government globalist agenda, they're gonna be targeted, and people who qualify to be on the patriot side of the ledger, well, we're going to put them there. But I think that the days of using these distinctions like Republican and Democrat, and I'd be interested in hearing your response to this, both of y'all. Those terms at this point seem to be meaningless to me.
Well, this is Rex again. Duke, not to interrupt you, but let me throw out one point before I forget it. So here's the only problem. I agree with you, Chris, that saying Republican or Democrat, even like I said, saying conservative, I can define conservative really easily in one sentence. Most people can't. But here's the only problem with using the terms globalist and patriot. And I understand the meaning and what you're trying to drive forward with it. But unfortunately, that's closely tied. Those are the two terms that are interesting friend, so to speak, Alex Jones used, and we all see what happened to him as they raked him through the coals. And granted, he went off on some pretty far tangents sometimes, but some of the points that he brought up are correct. So that's the only thing that I would caution being careful using those particular terms is, you know, he's already been sent out to pasture and he used those terms.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I would say also, though, that Alex Jones continues to fight. And some of the things that Alex Jones has said have been turned out to be true. Some of the things that he said have absolutely not. But you know that I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's important that I didn't even realize, frankly, that he use those designations. Globalist and Patriot.
Yeah, now I've kind of outed myself that I used to listen to Alex Jones, I suppose. But like you said, a lot of the topics he brought up were spot on. But yes, those were two of his, I would argue, most used buzzwords. And you know how marketing and branding and all that sort of thing matters now, and everything's narrowed down into, you know, just a couple of keywords and sound bites. So you may want to go back and do a little digging on that. But I agree 100% with the sentiment of using those terms, of course.
Yeah,
Rex,
that makes sense to me. And we just so do you agree with me, Rex, that the term Democrat and Republican right now in the current circumstances that we live in are almost indistinguishable?
Well, I agree 100%. As a matter of fact, I tell everybody, look, I vote Republican because I can't vote for anybody that stands for the Democratic platform. But the truth is, I would argue that I'm far more of a libertarian / independent, so to speak, in many of my views, simply because the Republican identity, in my opinion, especially here in Louisiana, as you've just pointed out with some of our quote-unquote fellow Republicans, the whole brand is tarnished.
It is. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Can I go to one other bill regarding Presley? Then I want to move to something else, if y'all don't mind.
We're going to go there, but I can't let you go too much further because I got to go back to a few things that you said. Now, you said Paige Cortez is running for lieutenant governor, but isn't it true that it's rumored that Sheck Snyder is going to try to make a run at lieutenant governor as well?
That Duke, that's what I hear, and that will be an interesting situation. I don't know how that's all going to work out, but I did hear that about Sheck Snyder. I've actually heard it about both of them, and I do know this.
Given that
recently, again, I don't know what your feelings are about Billy Nungesser. I think he's a good person. I think he's got a great heart. You know, I don't know how philosophically conservative he is, but I think he's a man of service. I think he's got a good heart. But I'll say that I went to, I was at something for Billy Nungesser not too long ago, and Clay Sheck Snyder introduced him. And I thought while I was there that was probably, if you're trying to burnish your conservative credentials, that maybe it's not a good idea to have Clay Sheck Snyder introducing you at an event. That's just my estimation of it. But that kind of gave me some indication that Sheck Snyder wants to be lieutenant governor. But I've heard from people that Paige Cortez does. So I don't know how that's going to shake out.
Well,
I do know that Paige Cortez a couple of times during the Senate session would walk in there and walk up to Paige Cortez up at the at the top there and they would talk and he'd hand him different things. And I know what they were doing. Paige Court, they were talking about bills that they wanted to hear and bills that they wanted to kill. And we're talking about two liberals. Okay. I'm sorry. Those guys are liberals.
Well, the word that I was told, the word that
Governor Edwards,
Chris,
and they do not have any allegiance to the Constitution or to conservatism. I'm telling you, I saw it with my own two eyes.
Well, Chris, okay, I got to ask you this question. I've been trying to get it into you for a while here now, because what I understand is what was going on down there was that Sheck Snyder and Cortez were at war and were killing each other's bills, like the election integrity bill. I think it was 1022 that you were talking about with the Zuckerbucks. That Cortez was trying to kill a Sheck Snyder bill because they were at war. Is that
Well, if they
An
were at
observation
war,
that you made?
if they were at war, Duke, I can tell you right now, they had a funny way of showing it. You know, I was sitting there watching them, and I watched Shaq Snyder go into the Senate chambers and go up and talk to Cortez, and they would visit and this, that, and the other. And look, all I know is the bills that they had an awful lot of bills in common that neither one of them wanted. So if they were at war with one another, they still had an awful lot of things in common that they jointly wanted to kill. And I know I can tell you that there are no two people in Louisiana politics who have done more over the past 2 years to sabotage the conservative agenda and good constitutional legislation than those two guys. They do not have a right to serve in elected politics in Louisiana ever again because of what they have done. The fact that Cortez, for instance, would kill a bill that would have cleaned up our election process, other bills too. I could sit here and talk to y'all all night about what that guy did right in front of me in the state legislature. You know, it's one of those deals where we have to make sure that people understand exactly who he is and exactly who Shaq Snyder is. You know, it's just Duke, I'd love to sit down here with you and Rex, you know, just for one day down there at the legislative session and just get your reaction to some of this stuff. You know,
Well,
I think you would find
a lot of this
interesting.
Isn't a lot of this from these legislators that are supposed to be representing the people? And we had this conversation not too long with Congressman Higgins and talking about DC, but Baton Rouge isn't that much different. And isn't it a lot of wheeling and dealing? It's not about what's best in the best interest of the citizens, but, you know, isn't it about, you know, hey, the buddy system, you help me with my bill, I'm going to help you with your bill. And, you know, what's best for everybody is not what the end result is. It's what ends up being the best for, you know, the legislator who's trying to push some issue.
Yeah. Duke, I gotta tell you that's what I've seen very, very directly. It's like you walk in there, and one of the big complaints that my wife had, you know, you have a whole host of Louisiana citizens who go down during the legislative session and testify very passionately about these bills that are not good, and some, in favor of some that are good. And it is amazing the degree to which you kind of sense this condescension. You sense this idea that these guys are sitting up on a throne somehow, and they're not really accountable to us. They just kind of have to put up with us for a few hours and listen to our concerns and then do whatever the hell they want to do anyway. And I'm telling you that people sense that when we're down there. They do not view themselves, this is my perception, I can't speak for anyone else, but they do not view themselves as really accountable to the people as envisioned in the Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence. They view themselves, once they get there, as beholden only to the special interests and not to the average Louisiana citizen anymore. And I just think that it comes with the old notion, y'all probably heard this, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's very difficult to get into a position of authority and political power and not become corrupted by it. And it's the very rare man who can avoid that. In fact, probably the last one was probably Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire for 18 years and never, ever became corrupted by it. In fact, he wrote the Meditations. He was the great Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, and he was one of the very few leaders in history who actually had enormous power, but never allowed himself to become corrupted by it. And I can't say that about anybody, or very, very few down at the state legislature.
Well, go ahead, Rex.
Well, I was going to say, so I just had a comment up on the screen. I'm going to put it back up there. This is from Linda and Wayne, Whittington, Villa Moret. Said all the deals that are made at Ruth Chris Steakhouse, and they are all in there together cutting their deals. I've seen this myself several times while I was in Baton Rouge. They are all one. I think that is one of the big problems.
Yeah, Rex,
Well,
I think you're right. You're right
well,
about that.
and Chris,
And it's
something
one of the
else.
deals where the only thing we can do, the only thing that we can do is make sure that every voter in these districts is aware of exactly what they're doing. We have to do it because they believe that they are untouchable, and we have to show them that they're not untouchable. I don't know.
Well,
it's Barrow.
Chris, don't we need more people? Chris, don't we need more
Yeah.
people running? That's because there's not any competition. While we've been on the show, I had somebody ask him, who's running against Presley? Is anybody going to step up and run against Presley? Here's another thing: qualifying for school boards. How many school boards across the state of Louisiana abused, the families and the children over all of these COVID mask mandates and all this BS? They belligerently abused people, in my opinion. How many people are right now, because qualifying is what, here in a couple of weeks?
Yeah. In other words, you're
for the
saying
majority of
what
school
you're
boards
saying
across
is
the state?
Who's going to jump up and run for school board?
Yeah, because everybody watching the show, it's all great to hear us talking about these bills and the failures of our elected representatives who go down there and do one thing and then come back home and say they did something else. But if people, regular people,
your point is
who's going to challenge
them? Yeah, that's a great point. And honestly, it is a big challenge to find good people to run against these guys. And we found one down here, but we're looking every day, Duke. We're looking every day to find good candidates to run against these guys. And Paula Davis, Moon Griffon calls her Paula Pelosi Davis. She is the biggest rhino in the state legislature, but she's attractive. She's blonde hair, attractive girl. And she won last time unopposed, but she's horrible. Okay. Just absolutely horrible. She makes Thomas Presley look like Winston Churchill. Okay. And all I can tell you is we found someone to run against her. I'm not going to say his name yet, but he's going to run against her. And I think that she's vulnerable, and he's probably going to knock the biggest rhino in South Louisiana out of the state legislature if we work hard enough. But I agree with you. People have to step up and understand that if we don't start challenging these people and you don't show courage and come forward, ultimately we're going to lose our republic. We're going to lose our freedom. We're going to lose our liberty. And it takes courage to do it. So you're right. Somebody has to challenge him. And again, I don't know Presley's whole record. You may know more about his record than I do. I just know what I saw in 2022 on some critical bills. And I'm thinking, why would a Republican from North Louisiana, my hometown, come down here and oppose this legislation right in front of me? Why would you do that? What's the reason for that? And I haven't found one. And I think that if we continue to expose these things, perhaps it will encourage conservative constitutional citizens to run for office. And that's what we're doing.
So we got a comment here. It says Dodie Horton had an incredible bill in education and it was killed in committee. Now, before we segue over to Dodie, I want to remind everybody that Dodie also tried to put up the infamous basically toy gun bill at the behest of our good sheriff up here in Bossier Parish, and we all know how that went. But Chris, in your letter from your group and organization, you mentioned Dodie Horton. Now, up here, Dodie is well loved in District, what does she do? District 9, I believe. So tell us a little bit, because this will relate directly to Bossier folks up here. Tell us a little bit about Dodie. Why is she kind of in the crosshairs?
Well, I love Dodie. I think Dodie's a good representative. I think she's done a lot of things. She did the only thing I can possibly criticize Doty for is that she did vote for this House Bill 165, was this green energy wind turbine boondoggle. And I think that maybe she didn't fully understand the bill, didn't really understand necessarily what was going on there. And, it's I got to tell y'all, it's very difficult for me to criticize Doty because she brought a bill down here. It took a lot of courage for her to do it. And it really shouldn't take a lot of courage in Louisiana to bring the bill that I'm fixing to tell y'all about. But it was House Bill 837. And basically, all the bill did, all it would have done, it would have prohibited public school teachers who teach kindergarten through 8th grade from allowing the teacher in those classrooms to talk about the teacher's gender identity or sexual orientation to a classroom full of grade school students. And it was brought forward because of all the poison that's being introduced in the public schools across the country. It was a good bill to basically say, guess what? When you're in the classroom, listen, you freak, don't bring up this kind of bullshit to the students, okay? You just can't do it. Talk about the subject at hand, talk about the issues at hand with your students, but basically it was don't bring up perverse sexual ideology in the classroom. She brought it forward, and it was a very, very good bill, and I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting down there in the education committee, guys, and the bill was killed by Republican Representative Lance Harris, Republican Representative Vincent St. Blanc, the Rhino Barbara Freeberg out of Baton Rouge, and the Rhino Stephanie Hilferty out of Jefferson and Orleans Parish. Those 4 Republicans killed a bill that simply would have prohibited teachers from talking about radical sexual concepts to public school students in the classroom, okay? And the bill lost in committee. If all those 4 Republicans had voted for it, it would have gotten out of committee in an 8-3 vote, and it would have gone into the full House and probably would have passed. The Republican chairman, Lance Harris, had a great opportunity to lead on this bill. I don't know who bought and paid for him. I don't know. I don't have any idea who owns him, but somebody owns him because a Republicans from Rapides Parish, chairman of a committee with a bill like this, to basically not only vote against a bill, but, well, actually, he didn't even have the courage to vote on it. He didn't even vote. But the other 3 voted against it. Bottom line is, it's reprehensible that this bill would have been killed by 4 Republicans in committee. This is a reprehensible failure to protect our public school children in school in Louisiana. And everybody should know these 4 Republicans' names. And Doty Horton brought the bill, and I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting down there watching this, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. The kind of garbage they were coming up with and the objections it's like, who owns you? I felt like standing up in there and just saying, Representative Harris, who owns you? Because you're absolutely not accountable to the citizens of Louisiana. How do you oppose a bill like this? And how do you encourage, he's the chairman of the committee, by the way, and how do you encourage these 3 other Republicans to oppose a bill like this to protect Louisiana public school students? I just couldn't believe it. So it's very difficult for me to criticize Doty, but I will say that, that she did vote for the green energy bill, which was just a monstrosity that passed in both houses, the House and the Senate.
Well, obviously somebody has to be cashing in on this green energy wind turbine things. I mean, look, our oil field service company, we worked up in the Rockies for countless years, and I can tell you, if you will travel up there to the foot of the north end of the runway in Casper, Wyoming, you can find the windmill graveyard burial ground right up there of all those dadgum wind turbines. They're burying them in the ground because they can't destroy them or something or another. what are we going to do? Just dump them off in the ocean with the next Katrina, Rita, Ida, or whatever that comes through there? Or are they just going to let them lay on the
Well,
ocean
Duke,
floor out there? Because I don't think those
I
things
don't
are going
know
to be able
what
to handle it.
to do with them. I mean, they hadn't even built them out there yet in the Gulf. But I will tell you one. That they everywhere this kind of wind energy turbine, green energy stuff has been tried, Germany and in other places, it's been a colossal failure. It just does not work. I mean, first of all, you have to rely on the wind's not blowing. Guess what? You don't get any energy. You know, it's just it's not reliable. Secondly, I mean, there are thousands of birds that are killed in these turbine blades. It's an environmental disaster. But it just
Well, that's a
doesn't
good
work.
point. That's a good point. Where's Ducks Unlimited? where is Ducks
You know
Unlimited?
what? That's a great point. Do you realize? I can't even remember the exact statistic, but it was staggering to me when I read the amount of wildlife that is killed every year by these turbines. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was like, you got to be kidding me.
Well,
I mean,
who would have thought that?
It just blew my mind.
Who would have thought that giant blades turning around, in the sky and in thousands and thousands of acres would have killed birds? Who would have ever thought that?
I don't know. You have
So
to be.
what elected official is going to profit off of this? Getting these wind turbines down there in the Gulf.
Let me tell you, one of the co-authors of the bill. What I'm fixing to tell you guys is really the kind of thing that I think really turns off voters in Louisiana. One of the co-authors, Representative Joseph Ogeron out of Houma, I think it's Houma Thibodeau, owns Second Wind. It's called Second Wind LLC, Second Wind Machine LLC, or something. I don't know. Anyway, about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, his company built two of the big super feeders. And you have to have the big super feeder vessels in order to transport the turbine components out to their offshore site so they can construct all the turbines out there. So his company built the big super feeder. And then a year later, 18 months later, he happens to be one of the co-authors of this legislation that's designed to build turbines over 25,000 acres of Louisiana offshore water. Well, his company stands to make tons of money off of this. Was this disclosed to anybody in the legislature? Was this disclosed by any other legislator? Hey, look, you know what? This doesn't really look good nationally. This doesn't really look good to the citizens of the state of Louisiana. Do you think maybe someone should say something about this? Nobody said anything, and guess what? The bill flew through the House and flew through the Senate, and now it's law in Louisiana. And big green energy companies are going to be getting hundreds of millions of dollars of federal subsidies, our taxpayer money, in order to build these turbines that don't work in our Gulf. Should that make some people mad?
Well, it's always, goes back to the old saying, follow the money and just see where that leads. And, it's unfortunate if this is the case that, legislators like Doty or whatever, I'll give her benefit of the doubt on this one because she did help with the Cypress District legislation and putting that forward and did as well as she could with it. But I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she just didn't pay close enough attention to the legislation or whatever, and maybe she didn't know about the potential conflict of interest here. So,
yeah, I think maybe so, because I think she's got a sincere heart, Duke, and I think that she is. I just think she's a good person, and I'm not sure that. And I think that maybe she was misled a bit. Doty's got a good heart, maybe a little bit naive in some ways, and I think maybe she was misled by some of these people. But I've seen her do too many good things to put her in the category of some of these other people. I'll tell you that. I just can't really do that in good conscience.
All right. So as we've been talking, I've been putting up, the couple of 2 or 3 pages of the letter that you authored and all that with the Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. So if people want to follow your group, is your group on social media? How would they do that, or how would they keep up? Do you have a mailing list or anything like that?
Duke, we are very very close to having our website put up. This really is something that was kind of born organic out of the very latter part of the last session, when I just finally said, nobody's speaking for the citizens down here, and these people are hypocrites because they're doing one thing here, and so we decided we're going to do this. So we're very, very young in the making, but we almost have our website up, and I'll go ahead and give it. It's www.lacag.org, www.lacag.org, and the email is the primary email is info at lacag.org, and we are just very, very excited about doing what needs to be done. And our primary focus is to expose Republican legislators who are sabotaging the constitutional legislation, good legislation designed to protect the citizens of Louisiana, some of which we've talked about, and expose Republicans who support legislation like HB 165, which is not in the best interest of Louisiana citizens. And that's what we're all about, and that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it unapologetically. And Duke, we're also going to speak out and try to find good conservative young men and women to run for office, because we have to have it.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and you're more than welcome to stay. You know, we could actually sit here and go till probably midnight, or I don't know, maybe even daylight if we wanted to. But we've done a 3-hour marathon show before, but I've certainly enjoyed the conversation, and we'll make sure and start following your group too, especially if y'all happen to get on social media on, Facebook or anything like that. We'll keep an eye out on your website, make sure that any of the materials that y'all release, we'll share out as well, just to try to keep everybody informed.
Thank you for that, Duke. Thank you for all of the work that you do, and for your uncompromising on things that really matter. And, all I can tell you is they call you Duke for a reason. That you were not named Duke by accident.
Well, thank you.
All right, so shall we end the segment there with Chris and let him get back to his normal life and family or whatever, and we'll proceed on bashing our local politicians?
God
We'll
bless
continue
y'all. Y'all have
on.
a great evening. Thank you for having me on, and I'll come back anytime. Y'all keep up the good work.
You're welcome anytime. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah, hey fellas, how's it going?
Pretty good. Appreciate you coming on, and we can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear us?
I can, yeah. I'm heading to the backyard by the deck, and I'll sit here and have an interview with you guys. It's great.
Awesome. Hey, Craton, man, I was getting worried about you there a little bit, but I am glad you came through. And you know what we do here on BossierWatch. We believe that the elected officials need to be accountable to the public, and for you, wanting to be a politician, you didn't have any opposition, so you were able to get right in there. And unfortunately, you said that you wanted to have a race, but you didn't get one. So we want to try to find out, what's your vision for, the education, and what do you believe, so that the public knows.
Well, yeah, you're right. I was really surprised that I didn't have any opposition. I figured with everything that we have going on in the country, everything you see on the TV, everything you hear on the radio, that there was going to be people standing in line. That's really what I thought. However, there wasn't. So, it was for me. I was one of those dads that had already called the school. I had already called a few school board members about things that I was worried about, and I thought, I'm not getting anywhere really. These guys are doing everything they can, I guess. Trying to do everything they can to do everything right. And my questions, I'm sure, are kind of falling on deaf ears at this point in time, just because they're hearing it 100 times a day. So I don't know. I was listening to the radio one night. I'm a big talk radio fan, and I was listening to Mark Levin, and he kind of had a call to action kind of segment of his show, and I thought, it's my turn. It's our turn. I've always thought that I'm too young for this, or I'm not the right guy for the job, and that's exactly what got us in the position we're in right now. So I'm just
Amen to that.
I'm a local businessman. Uh, I would like to think I'm the best bicycle businessman in this part of the state anyway, maybe this part of the country. And I'm just trying to bring some energy to a seat that has probably been vacant of energy for a little while. All due respect, I grew up right next door to JW Slack, 2 doors down. And when I set out this venture, I really there was two things that had to happen. I wanted to know that he wasn't running again, or that he would endorse me, so to say. And then B, my house wasn't even in the district at the time. So I went and talked to JW back in January and told him my intentions. And at that time, he told me that he had no intentions of retiring. And, we kind of left it at that. I kind of, came home, told my wife, I said, there's a couple things that are going to have to go our way for this to even come true. We'll see what happens. We'll just leave it in the Lord's hands, and we'll go with it, whatever happens. Well, my wife got awarded. She works in the system. She's a para up here at Apollo, and she got an award at one of the school board meetings, and I happened to be there for that. And JW had got done with the meeting. I was still there. I kind of wanted to hear what a meeting was about. And he got done with the meeting. He came over, shook my hand, said, "Kiddo, I'm not running again. I think you'll be a good candidate for the job. Go for it." Again, I grew up. His son was my football coach at Green Acres Middle School. I just have skin in the game. I have a wife that's in the system. Both of my kids. I have a kid that is in 8th grade at Green Acres Middle School. I got another kid that's at Apollo. She's in the 3rd grade. So, what better time? It's our turn. It's my turn. That's really how I felt when I got in.
Go ahead, Duke.
Well, man, that is perfect reason to get involved, and you're right. You're hitting on all cylinders. That it's never a perfect time for anybody to run, but you're at a point. You got skin in the game. You're never too young or you're never too old. And kudos for putting your name on the line and stepping out there. Um, you know, on issues and kind of where you stand and what you believe. Where did you kind of fall on the COVID mandate? The mask mandates, and I don't want to put you in a box or make you second guess, but that was that a lot of people. I'll tell you that I had some problems with some of the decisions that were made. Um, we see now, hindsight's 2020. The mask mandates were a joke. The COVID vaccines may ultimately end up having killed more people than they've kept alive. Would you have done anything different or voted any different, or how would you have been on that issue?
Well, I honestly, I've never liked to play Monday morning quarterback when it comes to that, and I wasn't in the position to vote on anything. Nor was I preview to anything that my soon-to-be colleagues, I guess, were preview to. I would like to think they maybe had more information than Joe, General Bike Shop Public guy, has. With that said, again, going back to my original why I wanted to run, I had called about things. I had talked to people. It really upset me that here I was at a bicycle shop and my kids were at home, and everybody in the world that was at the school was now at the bicycle shop. It's like, what are we doing here? It was kind of redundant. I didn't understand it. With the mask, I never wore one at my work. I never made my customers wear one. If they wanted to, fine. Um, it, we were our busiest at the bicycle shop at the time, and so here I am dealing with more people than I've ever dealt with before, and it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. Then after we knew about the mask, I understand that these people are making really tough decisions, and they were making decisions in the best interest of our kids. So I like to give everybody that benefit of the doubt. I would at least like to say that, so whether I would have done anything different or not, I don't know. I really don't, because I was just a bicycle guy at that time, and I'm still very novice to this political game. My dad is Jimmy Cochran. He's on the police jury, but my dad did a really good job of keeping his political stuff away from the family. I don't never talk about police jury stuff with my dad. We're busy 8 hours a day trying to sell as many bicycles as we can. But with that said, I knew that it was now. I'm 42 years old. I'm in the prime of my life. It was my turn to make a go at it, and I really look forward to bringing the energy to the seat and hope that I can make some really good decisions for the children and the people of Bossier Parish.
So let me ask you this: Are there any specific decisions or specific things that prompted your interest and caused you to run? You mentioned, that some people had reached out to you and that sort of thing. Anything in particular? I mean, a lot of what we're talking about these days is around school security and all that. And, I mean, is there anything that stands out to you that you think the school board should consider differently or anything like that?
I really, I tell you, it was those times that I told you about earlier that I called people with the school board, and we had an incident over here on the corner at Green Acres, which heck, that's been happening since I was a kid there. And I guess for now that I'm a parent, it's a little different than when I was 12 or 13, and I was probably one of the knuckleheads out there fighting. These kids are fighting a little different than we did. So it boiled down to this. I was just tired of sitting on this side of the table. Again, I'm really good at what I do when it comes to the business of running a bicycle shop and how to maintain people that work for that place and how to maintain the steady, just what it takes to run a local business here in town. And I want to bring those attributes of myself to the job. I don't even know what door to walk in yet, guys. I'm that novice to it, and I'll just be straight up honest with you guys. I don't know if I come in the back door now. I got me a suit, so I did that, and this is my first interview. I got my wife nervous as hell over there. So I'm here to learn, play the game, and just see where this can take us as far as what can I do to bring energy and more positivity to the job. Uh, you know, Again, JW Slack did it for a very long time, and I know I'm trying to step in and fill some awfully big shoes. But at the same time, even he commented to me that maybe he shouldn't have been in this last time. So my calling may be 4 years too late. I don't know. I hope for the next 4 years and maybe the next 12 years, because we do have a limited term, and I am for that as well. I like term limits. Get the old out there now. If I'm doing a great job and everybody loves me, it's sure going to be hard to say goodbye.
Yeah, and
Well-
I'm not going to hold. Sorry, Duke. I'm not going to hold you to any specific things because you're still relatively new at it. But of course, as Duke and anybody that watches the show can attest, I usually go straight to the Second Amendment. So we've all seen some of the all the issues that have been going on in Texas and different things. Do you have at this point? Do you have any ideas on anything that you would suggest to your fellow school board members? That we could do differently or better? Or have you paid any attention to this SRO and traffic cop situation and have any opinion on that yet?
So, the first I heard about the SRO and again was just a little while ago with you guys, and so I don't have any input on that. All I know is what you guys just gave us, which thank you guys for doing what you do. When it comes to some of this stuff that's happening nationally in our schools, of course, this was a major reason why I got in. It makes me sick to my stomach that the government, the federal government, could be holding our kids over our head. For me particularly, I'm in Bossier City. My district is number 7. So a lot of these districts, a lot of these people, free lunch, things like that, maybe not be as big a deal as where I'm going to be, right? So I'm learning this balancing act is, do I do this job with the mindset of my constituents, which most of them, let's just be honest, here in District 7, are most of the parents more worried about what's in the books in the library or if their kid's getting fed that day? I hate to say it, but that's just the truth. And so here I am. I don't want to see any of that. I don't want none of that that's happening, nationally coming to here to Bossier City. I love it. I have skin in the game. I know what it was like going to Apollo, to Green Acres, and to Airline High School. And I just want my kids to have the same thing I had. That's really where I stand on it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hate to, somebody put in the comments a while ago and they said you are the most popular today than you'll ever be, and this is your honeymoon phase, and it's true, it is,
Yeah.
because I mean, I wasn't ready for you to come on tonight, but and I don't want to cut your knees out from under you, but I got a million questions I could ask you about, but sitting here trying to think of an important one, not to waste time, and I'm babbling a little bit, but I'll ask you one question. I think that probably in the future we're going to have a new superintendent, and historically in Bossier, it seems like we can't get a superintendent that's not a coach. Now, I don't have anything against coaches, but the mindset or what the whisper campaign is that, well, coaches, you know, make the best leaders. I guess it's the syndrome. I don't know, but would you consider us having a superintendent that doesn't come from being a coach? Because it seems like in Bossier, all we can get for a superintendent is a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best person should get the job. With that being said, I think that coaches play a humongous role in the youth of our kids today. I mean, heck, um, our superintendent now, I didn't play under him, or I think I was a little too young for that. But I did play baseball under Roland. And those people do make huge impacts in your life, whether it be good or bad. We never know. Some people might have had a bad experience with that said coach. With all that, I think that we should always take the best person for the job. So I would like to see who, when that time comes, and of course I guess I'll be in that position. I'd like to see all the candidates and what they got to offer.
And I say that not to back you in a corner, but a lot of people feel like that Bossier, we place too much priority on athletics and sports and not enough on, the education part, and that maybe it's time we had a little bit of a change is the reason I said. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, because a lot of people say it under their breath, but they don't say it out loud. And as you already know about me and Rex, we don't hold back. We throw it all out there.
No, I mean, there's whispers all over the place. I've been running the BMX track out at Cargill Park, and for 7 years now, and that's why I can't come on Tuesdays. However, this Tuesday we got rained out there, so it just made it good for me to come on with you guys. And there's always whispers in the crowd. There's and I could imagine. I have no idea what they are, but heck, I drive by these football stadiums. I drive by where we're doing, and I see it from the outside, but I have no idea what's going on the inside. I really don't. My wife is a para up here at Apollo. I get to hear what she tells me. She's in the middle of working on her certification. Luckily, hopefully, if everything works out, this time next year she'll be a certified teacher in Bossier Parish, and so I tell you, I was a bicycle guy up until 3 weeks ago, and here I am. So I do want to get with you, Duke, later in the future, and let's hash out some of the real actual issues. To be honest with you, when I was sitting in that meeting, when my wife got awarded, and then I was sitting in the last week's meeting, I figured I better get me a suit and start going, listen up, what's going on. I have no idea what they're saying. They're talking jargon that I've never heard before. If it doesn't have to do with switching gears on a bicycle, I hadn't talked about it in the last 25 years of my life. So I'm going to come in there. I promise you this. I'm going to give it the best I got. And I'm going to make Bossier Parish happy. I'm a prodigal, I'm a son of Bossier City, and just want to do it proud.
Awesome. Well, I'll kind of start wrapping it up with this. I know you're big into BMX and bicycling and all that. Do you fish any?
So you can ask anybody that knows me. I can't sit still long enough. I'm always doing something. I've been building this deck. God, look at that deck, guys.
Yeah,
Um,
cool.
and the answer is no. I get frustrated. I suck really bad at things. I'm really worried what I'm going to do at these meetings. Like
Well,
I'm
here's the
that's
here's the reason I ask is because with fishing, sometimes we get a lukewarm response to it with some of the schools, not all of them, but I may reach back out to you and see if we can, I don't know what it might be yet at this point, but see if we can get a little support and backing in whatever capacity from the school board to further promote competitive bass fishing, because it's a huge deal around here.
Yeah, I had a young man in my bike shop the other day. I wish I could remember his name, but apparently he's pretty good in the tournaments. And my wife is the coach here at Apollo for the bow, the bow and arrow or
Yeah,
whatever you want to
archery.
call it.
Yeah.
Archery, that's right. That's right. So, I love all that. I played ball and stick sports because when in 95, 96, 97, that's all there was. People didn't know about it. BMXers, I existed, but I was one of only, 10 in the state up here, right? So I'm all for those other sports. We were at the last meeting where all the archers were there, and I look at these kids and I think, wow, that's really cool that they're getting acknowledged for this and they have something to do, because none of these kids, maybe 5 or 10 of them there could do something else, but out of the 30 there, they may not be doing anything else. So absolutely, bass fishing, it may not be my deal, but I support it 100% if it's for our kids here in Bossier Parish.
Hey, we got something in common. When I was a kid, I got a mongoose for my birthday, and my best friend had a red line, and we used to do the bike riding and all that. So see, we got more than just fishing in common.
That's right. That's right.
Well, if it's any consolation that, yeah, I've done a little bit of biking, but it has been in Colorado and Utah and Wyoming. I love it up there biking in the mountains. But around here, it's too hot. Can't do it.
Yeah, no, I get it. I've been to many of those places, and I've been lucky to have fun bike racing for the majority of my life. And that's going back to the start of the conversation. I was a bit surprised I didn't have an opponent, and yeah, without sounding like a butt face, a little let down. I like a race. I like to get spicy. I like for it to happen. I like to get my hands dirty. So I'm thankful for the position I'm in. But I was ready, like I told you in that text. I was ready to go. I had the T-shirt ready. I had the signs ready, and I'm still going to get a few of those. I was ready to go.
We appreciate you coming
Well,
on.
we do appreciate you coming on, and there's a lot of other issues and tough questions that you could get, as if you were in a race. I wish you would have a race. I think having races will make you stronger. It certainly will. Having been in races in my past, they made me stronger. They made me more educated on the issues, and the public deserves to know how you feel on those issues. So I would encourage you to kind of study some of the issues. School choice and things like that, curriculum. I seen in the comments somebody put a couple of issues in there to throw at you, in which would, we're not going to beat you over the head on it, but maybe in the future we can get you to come back after you got your feet wet, and maybe you don't have a black eye. You can come back on and kind of chew the fat a little bit about what's going on with the school board and stuff.
And look, you can you can do the interview from the bike park if you want. Take a couple of minutes. You don't have to do a 20 or 30-minute deal, but come on with us for a few minutes from the bike park. We'd like to see what happens down there too, and show everybody.
Well, I'd love to do that, fellas. Thanks for being kind to me, and yeah, let me get my feet in the batter's box, and then you can throw me a couple of fastballs, curveballs, and we'll take hacks at them. All right, guys.
Sounds good, Craton. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good evening.
Danny, I called you and you were kind of already focused in on this thing on the port. And, last week we covered this a little bit, and we pointed out that, last year, I think it was 2021, that HB 10, I think it was 105, that Representative Thomas Presley brought a bill to basically, from what I understand, was to move it from Title 34 to a different part, move it somewhere else. Is that accurate?
Well, yes, I guess that's pretty accurate. I guess actually what it did, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I guess actually what it did the year before, 2020, evidently there was an advertising glitch, and the bill was run under a population and instead of under the Caddo-Bossier Port. And it's my understanding that it was moved from the population to the Caddo-Bossier Port specifically, is what the bill did in 2021.
Now, this bill, and what a lot of folks don't understand is the legislation actually was that made the amendments that have kind of popped their heads up here and got people's attention. I mean, we're kind of after the fact on this thing, but it actually took place in 2020. And, one of your other cohorts in the legislature is actually kind of one of the ones that kind of jumped up and caught this, right?
Yeah. My friend, Representative Glover is the one that actually caught this when it come to his committee. So it was kind of me and him actually agreed on this issue, and he was worried about, appointed boards having authority all over Caddo Parish, Caddo and Bossier Parish, with no oversight from the locals, and I agreed with him on that issue. The Caddo-Bossier Port is kind of, actually when I was grassroots organizing, Duke, before I actually run for office, I opposed the Caddo-Bossier Port's property tax renewal. And because basically what they got going on is they found out if you collect property taxes and don't pay any, that's a successful business model. And, that's one we wish we could all get. But, that's crony capitalism, I believe that's what that's called.
Well, Danny, this is Rex. I kind of was watching the video of the hearing down there when Glover got up there and spoke about it. And I saw Seaball jump up there, and I thought Seaball was going to jump up there in defense of Glover and supporting Glover's amendment to do something about this port board. I was kind of surprised that he took the exact opposite tact.
Yeah, yes, and to be totally honest, I can't comment on that because that's probably a better question from him, But I knew what my angle was. My angle was I wanted more local control, less, and what this gave is more state control, and the locals should be in control. Like for instance, I don't know if you realize this, but the port can actually, without anybody's opinion in the state in the Caddo or Bossier Parish, they can greatly reduce or eliminate the property taxes on businesses. And now, to me, that's when the small business owners and the working class people are going to pay extra property taxes when you have these large corporations that are avoiding property taxes. So that was an issue with me. The MPC oversees, I'm not really familiar with Bossier Parish, with Caddo Parish. It oversees a large area, and they are exempt from the MPC. Now, for those that know me, know I'm not a fan of the MPC. I call them, the pig farm police, because every time you don't give your private property rights away, they threaten somebody's going to build a pig farm by your property. But but if the working class and small business owners in Caddo Parish have to deal with the MPC, the port needs to deal with them. And so that was my angle. They should play by the same rules that the working class and small business owners in Caddo and Bossier Parish do.
Well, yeah, I 100% agree with you, but I also got to say that Duke and I were talking about the port, I think it was last week or show before last or whatever. Now, are we understanding correctly that the way we read the legislation, this Caddo-Bossier Port Commission Authority, whatever you want to call it, they're pretty much not accountable to anybody except maybe the legislature. Are we reading that correctly?
Well, that indirectly they are accountable to Bossier Parish Police Jury, the Caddo Parish Commission, the town of Bossier City, and the city of the city of Bossier City and Shreveport, and they're only accountable through them to their appointed board members. And you know how rogue that can get. I'm not a fan of appointed board members neither, because I like elected people that you can vote out of office, not people that are appointed. So there is some accountability there, but it's very indirect, and politicians like to love boards because they get to avoid accountability then.
Yeah, we've got one, and you probably heard us talk about it before, and I won't go too far into it, but we've got one up there, the Cypress board, and it's like pulling a tick that's got its head buried in you off of, trying to pull a tick out of you to get anything done. I would assume that's probably the case with this one, too.
Now, Mayor Glover,
well,
Danny, Mayor Glover addressed, in his role as the state rep. I just remember him as mayor, so I call him the mayor. It's no disrespect to him at all. But he addressed that in the committee. I mean, when he tried to make that amendment on the floor, and he said that there were people that were still on the port commission that he appointed when he was the mayor. So to the point of these local governing bodies have, oversight, I would contend that they don't have oversight, because these guys down here, they're not elected by the people, and they don't have no turnover. There's not even term limits for them serving there.
Yeah, these appointed boards are going to be the downfall of this state and our local accountable. We don't get rid of them, but if they want to get rid of board members, they can. They lead you to believe that they can't, but they can. If that board member is still serving, it's because somebody in position of power, a politician in position of power, wants that board member there. So they can get rid of one if he crosses them, but they use those. They use a period of time that probably more customary than in law, to say you can't remove a board member. These board, like I said, these boards are not good for the republic.
Well, I think a lot of people, like there's about 100 folks watching the show right now, and what I don't know if folks really understand. Sometimes we lose people, when we kind of start talking about these things, but basically, and Glover gave a really, and we're going to show it here in just a minute, he gave a really good example, and he was talking about if the port wanted to suddenly purchase a piece of land. I mean, pick a subdivision, pick any subdivision, where all of you watching, wherever you live, you may not even live in a subdivision. You may live out in a rural part of the parish or wherever. And if they wanted to come put a wrecking yard by the property, by your property, and turn your property and your home into a wrecking yard, there's nothing that you can do about it. There's nobody for you to appeal to. There's nothing you can do to stop it. I mean, am I right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And even on another aspect, the port owns 4,000 acres. So when the port buys property, it moves out of an entity that's paying property taxes into the port that pays no property taxes. And what your listeners need to know that's important about that, Duke, is they have to pay more property taxes to get the same service, because the port is giving that preferred status to themselves and to other people. And that's what this is my biggest objection to the way the port and also, if the port's going to buy a piece of property and they don't have to pay property taxes, and a business is going to buy a piece of property and they do have to pay property taxes, well, the individual or the small business owner is at a disadvantage because they have to pay these taxes. It's just unfair from stem to stern. I mean, the Republican platform is this: spread the tax base, lower the taxes. What the port does, it narrows the tax base and raises the taxes. The opposite of what the Republican platform is supposed to be.
Well, like I said, I was shocked to see, let's just say, other legislators' reactions to this. And you're right, it goes against, or at least in my mind, it goes against everything that the Republican platform is supposed to be, which is primarily smaller government. I can't see how anybody would support, honestly, support this commission, much less support expanding the power, the rights and powers of this commission.
Well, you know, and it's important to say this, and I'm not saying this about the legislatures, but there is tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars pouring through that port system out there. There's a lot of well-connected people in the community that are making a lot of money. And, you know, the love of money is the root of all evil. You know, what about all the vendors that sell products out there? They love this deal. What about the people that they're buying the property from? Well, the port can pay more than anybody else in town. You know, I would like to see some investigating reporting. You know, somebody actually paid, unlike us that are. I'm sitting on the side of the road talking to y'all, and y'all are in y'all's homemade studios working for nothing. You know, it'd be nice if we really had somebody on the payroll, and you know, that would go out and investigate. Who did you buy these 4,000 acres from? How much did you pay for this property? How much over market price was this property? You think about it, this is a license to steal. And don't get me wrong, I've talked to the port. I've got a lot of information from them. They've been very helpful. I'm not saying that it's illegal. I'm saying that it's unethical what's happening out there. And the port, the way they're running the business by not paying property taxes but collecting property taxes, I mean, you'd have to be, if you can't make money doing that, you know, you can't make money at all. And that's the road we're headed down here. And that's kind of, you know, I don't know if that was Representative Glover's angle, but that was my angle.
Well, and not just that, it's not only their ability to collect property tax, but their ability to borrow money through the LCDA and the bond commission, and then using other people's money, using tax dollars, and then turn around and loan that back out or just flat out give it away. You know, it's just like, show me the money. That's what it's come down to.
Well, and how that benefits all the parties involved is since they go through the port to get the bonds, the company doesn't have to pay taxes, so that lowers the interest rate they have to pay. Not the company. The bondholders don't have to pay don't have to pay taxes on the interest they charge. Now, what the port gets out of it, then they get a percentage of that bond payment. So they making money off of it both ways, and they can pour that money back into their bureaucracy out there at the board. Now, there is a misconception that the port is on the hook for these bonds if they're defaulted on. I think the proper word for these bonds are conduit bonds, so they're not on the hook for them. But it is benefiting the port greatly and those that are borrowing the money greatly to use the port to borrow this money.
Well, the only losers are if they want to put a pig factory next to your residential house. You're the one that's going to be the loser, right?
Yeah, well, that's the truth. Or something that they appear to be working with SWEPCO, and which is what originally raised my eyebrows. They look like they're working with SWEPCO and Foster Campbell to bring a large solar farm into North Caddo Parish. Well, and my opinion on solar farms is this: if they pay the same taxes and fees as the small business owners and the working class people in North Caddo Parish, that's fine. But if the port is rigging the deal, where you have these huge solar farms that pay little to no property taxes, I got a huge problem with that. And, you know, the estimates I look at, it's cost about $500,000 per acre to put in a solar farm. So just do the math on that. It doesn't take many acres for you run into hundreds of millions of dollars that the port can forgive or greatly reduce their property taxes.
Well, I have a source that, and I haven't confirmed it yet, that said that another angle is that potentially they're talking about a Top Golf coming down to on the Bossier side, downtown Bossier, and that the port was potentially going to be kicking in money to help fund a Top Golf down there. I hadn't confirmed that, but you know, I don't know if that's a justifiable, you know, economic development.
Well, economic development is when private individuals risk their private money to in a business venture. Economic development is not when the port rigs the deal in somebody's favor and they come in with a loaded deck to play with, so to speak. So that's not crony capitalism and economic development are two different things. So so do the people in Bossier Parish that don't play golf want to pay higher property taxes to give this group a break? I wouldn't think so. I mean, if it's a viable business, they ought to be able to pay the same property taxes as the rest of us.
I wonder if our local police juries, or if our local city governments, I mean, where were they? And we're going to show here in a minute. In fact, one of your cohorts down there in the legislature called out the mayor of Shreveport and the mayor of Bossier. Well, he didn't call them out, but he pointed out that they had no opposition to this. I wonder where all the other elected officials do they, and the MPC, do they not all realize that they just had all their legs cut out from under them?
Well, they yeah, but the port is in on the same deal as they are. They still get to prey on the small business owners and the working class people of the parish. But when we were dealing with the port, even though they don't have to ask anybody about avoiding these property taxes, they say they contact the school board, they contact the police jury or the commission, depending on if they're in Bossier or Caddo Parish, and they contact the sheriff's department to get their okay to avoid those taxes. So, these entities, now whether they're giving it in writing or how they're giving this, I don't know. But I'm being told that they have to, those three entities in whatever parish they're in has to okay it before they go ahead with the property tax reduction or elimination.
Well, Danny, let me ask you this, because it seems to me that these government entities and taxing authorities, it's like trying to play a game of whack-a-mole at Chuck E. Cheese or something like that. Is there any way to get rid of this commission or taxing authority, or are we just stuck with them now?
You can. You cannot. You probably at this point you can't get rid of them. The next time their property tax comes up on for renewal, you can vote against it. But the last one was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and it was for 20 years. So it's going to be a while before you get that chance. But what we need to do is go back to Baton Rouge and give the power back to the locals. We need to let less control in Baton Rouge and more control at the locals.
Yeah, I'd agree with that because, like you said earlier, being basically appointed bureaucrats, that's barely, any control that the people have over that, if any, really. Because getting them out of there is just like, prying eye teeth out of somebody.
Well, real quick, Danny, hang on a second. I'm going to play what Thomas Presley led with on his bill when he had final passage for HB 105. So bear with us for a second. You ready, Rex?
Yeah, hit play and see if it'll go ahead and bring the audio through.
Horton sends up technical amendments.
Without objection. Representative Presley on your bill.
Thank you, members, and Mr. Speaker. House Bill 105 is a local bill. Due to an issue with advertising last year, we passed the bill which provided the same rights and powers that are included in this legislation under the General Port Statute, based on a population figure. This bill simply moves those same rights and powers under the authorizing statute on the general bill to that of the Port of Caddo Bossier. It does not provide them with any new powers or rights that they do not already have. Thank you.
Now, the General Port Statute, that's Title 34, correct? Danny?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Now, he said that it doesn't add any new powers, but do all of the ports, I mean, to your understanding, do all of the ports in the state of Louisiana have the authority to control multiple parishes and economic development and go and buy property? And do they all get that and not be accountable to any other governing body?
I think for a large extent they do. I mean, they are very powerful. Just think about this, Duke. What if the politicians and the bureaucrats have the ability to rig a deal in their favor and profit them and their buddies tens of $millions? Now, I'm not saying about this about my representative friends. I don't know if they understood the bill they ran, but what I'm saying is rigging the deal in your favor can be quite financially rewarding.
Well, you might not say it, Danny, but I certainly will. Our friend Alan Seaball's got some splaining to do because I would argue he understood the bill. He understood what Cedric Glover was up there complaining about and was just like, oh, well, it's already there, so, we got to deal with it.
Well, speaking of Mayor Glover, let's listen to what his words were, and let's not put words in his mouth.
All right, Representative Glover on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, my amendment is pretty simple. Let me first of all say that I am a big supporter of the Port of Caddo Bossier. Port of Caddo Bossier has a daily employment number of about 1,700 jobs. Most of those jobs are manufacturing. Very few of them have to actually do with navigation of the Red River. Of those 700 jobs, I'm proud to say that I was a part of negotiating the last 1,100 of them between Bentler Steel, Ronpack, Paper Manufacturing, and Pratt Industries. And so our port essentially serves in large part as more of an industrial park instead of a port. And they are, as a result of this legislation, seeking to expand their capacity to be able to go out and facilitate economic development. One of the provisions that they are empowered to be able to do at this point is to acquire land outside of the original waterside, riverside footprint of the Port of Caddo Bossier. For instance, they can now acquire property in the interior portions, urban portions of Caddo Parish and Bossier Parish. Lines 15 and 16 of this legislation would exempt them from any property that they would acquire. Not only does it take it off of tax rolls, but it also exempts them from any jurisdiction of any of our local bodies, primarily the Planning Commission folks that would be able to say whether or not, say, a newly acquired 100-acre tract of land could be immediately transferred from having a residential status to a heavy industrial status. And it would also prevent the local city council, which would be the appellate body from that planning commission process, or the parish commission in the event of the parish, from being able to be the entity that has the ability to be able to weigh in on that as well. Invest the entirety of that power within 9 appointed commissioners that are appointed by the mayors, the parish commission, and various other bodies throughout Caddo and Bossier Parish. Some of those folks are still serving from my tenure in the mayor's office, so there is limited accountability. So I think the ability to be able to acquire land outside of the footprint of the port, control that land in terms of its usage status without having any supervision or jurisdiction from anybody within the local bodies of Caddo and Bossier Parish, anybody who's directly elected, is just simply a bad thing.
I'm going to stop him right there. I mean, look, when I got through watching this, I had to ask myself, am I a Republican? Am I really a Democrat? Because I agree with everything he says. Bueller?
That's why I voted for his amendment. I did too.
I mean, I don't know how much clearer somebody can put it than what he just put it, right, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, it was spot on. I mean, you know, I'm sitting there voting with my friend Cedric, Representative Cedric Glover, which is kind of odd, and then Sam Jenkins, which is the Democrat in Shreveport, he was voting with my Republican friend. So it was kind of an odd day there.
Well, I'll say this, and Paul Johnson, who's watching the show, commented Cedric wanted in on the action or into the action. Look, based on what the man said, I don't think it's that he wanted in on the action. I think Cedric was looking out for his constituents at that point, because I'm pretty sure he had gotten some feedback on it.
Yeah, and he made well, he made an unbelievable point, Danny, about the urban areas, and I had not considered, the I-49, what is it, the interconnector thing. I mean, how many years have we haggled about that? And you've got people who've not wanted to give up their homes over there. Through this mechanism, they basically could take a bulldozer right through the middle of Shreveport there and take out people's homes, whether they want it or not, right?
Yeah, the port has no oversight. And the important part to also remember is that we weren't approached with this legislation and talked about it ahead of time. I found out about this bill like 5 minutes before it was fixed to be presented on the House floor. I was younger then, I guess not that much younger, but I was new to office then. And now I would have tried to shut down the discussion until we figured out what was going on, because the port didn't involve anybody, or put it this way, the port didn't involve me in the conversation ahead of time.
Well, Mayor Cedric makes another comment here, and I want to play this and get your thoughts on what he says here, because if you're a conservative Republican, I mean, I don't know how you cannot disagree with his take right here. Listen to this.
And it makes us more like, the People's Republic of China as opposed to the United States of America. And so with that, I'm offering this amendment that seeks to delete that language.
All right, and I'm going to point one more thing for those of you watching the video. Note who just approached, Representative Presley with papers in hand, as if he's choreographing or directing how the debate's fixing to go.
Hey, Duke, before you hit play on that, let me see if I can switch screens real quick and show it on your screen. Hold on a second. Yeah, that's close enough.
Yeah, there we go. So, yeah. Danny, I know you can't see, but as Mayor Glover was finishing his comments, Representative Seabiscuit comes up to direct, I'm assuming, Thomas Presley on how he's going to argue or attack, Mayor Glover's amendment. So
I've recently watched it, so I did see that, but I have no idea really actually what happened at that point in time.
But I mean, does this type of activity is Mayor Glover correct that this is the kind of thing that People's Republic of China, where unaccountable bureaucrats making the decision, running over the public?
Yeah, it sounds just like the Republic of China to me, the Communist Republic of China, no doubt. It, and also Mayor Glover, Representative Glover, was in the committee where this bill was heard. So that's why he's got these amendments ready, because to my knowledge, I believe he said in committee he hadn't heard about this bill until it came in front of his committee. So I know he's a Democrat, and if he hadn't heard about it, and I'm a Republican, and I hadn't heard about it, I don't know who had heard about it beforehand. But it was definitely a mistake. This is a mistake, and when you make a mistake as legislators, like we do sometimes, you go back to Baton Rouge and fix it, and this needs fixed.
Well, that brings a good point because Seaball, had I think Mayor Cedric said it was a mistake, but then Seaball articulated something. Let me play that real quick.
Different from that.
Yes, as I stated, one, last year's act in and of itself was a mistake. Number two,
but it's already there. I mean, we can't
correct.
undo what was done last
Exactly.
year.
Not at this.
So
they can't undo it. That's great.
We can't undo it. I mean, is he right or is he wrong? We can't undo it. Because I find it hard to believe.
I don't really know what Representative Seaball was referring to, but I know we can go to Baton Rouge and run a bill to take the power away from the port and give it back to the locals. I know that.
Well, I mean, I don't think you're against being pro-economic development and trying to, get businesses to come to the community to, increase our tax base and get, jobs for folks in the community. I know you're not against that, but I think for me, I think what the biggest problem I have with it is that it's the no accountability, and you have an MPC for a reason to make sure that you put certain types of businesses in certain locations without jacking with somebody's quality of life or their livelihood. I mean, that's why we have all these bodies to kind of oversee this thing. That's my biggest problem with all of this. And yeah, there's the crony capitalism thing, but I mean, we have that with all of government, from DC to Baton Rouge. And I don't know that we'll be able to completely get rid of all of that, but with no measure of accountability, that's the full stop for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, what I think, I'm no fan of the MPCs by any managed imagination in Caddo Parish. But on the other hand, like I said, if the small business owner and working class have to deal with the MPC, the port needs to. And if the MPC is not operating correctly, we need to change the MPC, not just exempt the power players in town to give them advantage over the small business owner and working class people.
Yeah, I would agree. So, with that said, I mean, where do we go from here? Are we just stuck with these guys for now and until the, next time the millage renewal comes around and try to cut off their funding, or we just stuck with them, or is there anything else we can do?
Well, we can go back to Baton Rouge and change the legislation that gave all this power to them at the state level. We can do that. I would strongly encourage people to contact their police jury or Caddo Parish Commission, their school board members, their sheriff, and say, hey, we don't want to give special exemptions to these companies. We want them to pay the same taxes we do. And that's the way to approach this, in my opinion.
Well, I would agree. And so as we kind of wrap up this segment here with you, Danny, is there anything else that you want to share with everybody that, you've got going on or is going on down in Baton Rouge or anything else like that?
Yeah, let me share this with you. I heard y'all talking about the constitutional amendments earlier, and I'd like to give your listeners my input. And I would tell your listeners this. If you don't understand the constitutional amendment, vote no. Because by voting yes, you're changing the Constitution. So if they cannot explain it in a way that you understand and think you should vote yes, vote no. That's my opinion. Don't change the Constitution if you don't understand what you're changing.
Well, that's probably the best advice I've heard.
And always remember this, listeners. It's important to know they word those questions because they expect you're going to vote yes. So they're wanting you to vote yes. So if you don't understand it, vote no. That's kind of my rule of thumb I go by in Baton Rouge. If I don't understand a bill, lots of times I'll vote no. It may have been a good bill, but if I didn't understand it, I'm not going to put it in law. Sometimes I vote yes, and I should have voted no. And then sometimes I vote no, and I should have voted yes. But a good rule of thumb is don't change something if you don't understand what you're changing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's a lot easier to, reenact something if you need to than it is to get rid of something that's been put in place. It's always, you know, like clawing steel right there. So that's great advice, Danny. I appreciate that.
Guys, I sure appreciate everything y'all do in getting the word out there on the street what's going on. I'm glad I have a place to come voice my opinion on these subjects, and y'all have a great night.
All right. Thanks, Danny, and be safe driving home. Appreciate it.
See you later, Danny. Thank you.
You bet.
Let me switch screens here. And Jeff, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right. Glad to have you. And we'll just get started. Where do we want to lead off, Duke? Have Jeff tell us a little bit about himself, or what?
Yeah, absolutely. Because look, I followed this guy for, good grief. I think the early 90s or maybe even the late 80s. I've followed him since then. But a lot of folks may not know about Jeff. So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself to people that may not know you.
Yeah, it would be the early 90s. I came to LSUS in 1981, and I did a little occasionally for elections and the like, or maybe some other things. I'd be on TV occasionally. Occasionally I do a guest column in the Shreveport Times. I'd be a regular columnist there for about a year and a half, I think 97 to 98. Some of you may actually remember me from radio done from 1996 to 2000 on KCL, back when it was a Christian contemporary station. Then really picked up about 2002 writing for something that a number of you may be familiar with, FaxNet Update, which lasted a number of years and went away with
Lou
the demise of its editor. Yes, Lou Gehrig Burnett. And did some other things. I wrote for the Advocate in Baton Rouge between 2015, 2019. I had been writing for Hannah Publication Newspapers. That's a small chain in Northeast Louisiana since 2013, and blog now since 2005. Actually, I've got 3 of them. There's one's kind of the main one. It's called Between the Lines, and is republished in the Hayride pretty much every post, 5 days a week. During the legislative session, I have one called the Louisiana Legislative Log. That's also been going since 2005. There we just identify bills of interest, good and bad, and chart their course throughout the legislative session, sometimes special sessions. And then most recently, I started one called BossierViews. That was back in July. And basically it just republishes what I publish in Between the Lines that has anything to do with Bossier at all. And I've been pleased with it. Thanks for the mentions about it. I've got a number of subscribers now, and just keep trying to grind out some interesting stuff that anybody interested in Bossier politics would like to know about.
Yeah, I can say that I've enjoyed reading. I've always enjoyed reading your stuff, but the BossierViews, you've been cranking out a lot of stuff on that and some pretty interesting articles. Matter of fact, we'll get into King David here in a second, but you shot one out today. What was that one about? I just saw it come in the email, but I hadn't read it yet. Can you give us a quick summary?
Yeah, well, what mentioned last week at the city council meeting was the sale of the 2 alternative fuel stations by the city, and it's kind of got a history there. And what the piece goes into is you look at what's going on with the financials behind the stations, and say compare that to the arena. And if you're looking at those as the metric, if you're going to go ahead and sell the stations, then you better be sure you sell the arena, because it's a much bigger money loser. And there was a lot of controversy over the parking fee, not only the fact that there now is a $12 parking fee there, but it doesn't work very well. And some other things don't work around the arena. So you want to find out a little bit more, you can check it out. It's now the lead post at BossierViews.
Well, now that's interesting you say that about the parking fees, because I heard, Tommy the Chandler on Keel saying to Aaron and Mike that, hey, we'll see how it works out, and then we'll come back and we'll let you know whether it worked or it didn't work. So I haven't heard that he's been back on Keel.
Yeah, I know. According to social media, that there were some problems. So, yeah, let's see what happens. What the next step here is. That if that's what the mayor said, well then, I think somebody needs to be working on this.
Well, I can't stand it since we mentioned the parking deal. I've got to play my little video. So you may not know the movie Tremors, Jeff. Maybe you do, but anyway, it's had what's the guy's name? Anyway, let me just play it, and it'll make sense here in a second.
Because we want to know what we should do.
You guys do what you do best. Find something simple and complicated.
Okay, so that's what the government does best. Take something simple, like parking, and complicate it.
Well, Rex, to really kind of get down into the meat and potatoes of what we have Jeff on for tonight, I think we had in show 124, and I think we had coined that show as King David Returns, and there was an exchange between, Chris Smith and King David. And you want to gin that one up, and let's play that, and then we'll get Jeff's comment on that. I think he may have already commented on it, but we'll get him to say it again.
Yeah, and so like Duke said, this is an exchange between Chris Smith and King David himself, and they step on each other's toes a little bit, but King David goes off into his little spiel, so let's listen to it for just a second. Let me see. I should have it queued up. Hit
You're
play.
inferring that we do not have financial success at this time, and we don't prepare in future budgets 5 years out what capital outlay is going to be. I'm at a loss to understand why all of a sudden you propose something that we hadn't done before, and we don't do it at other parks.
Well,
so
excuse me.
What I'm
to your
saying,
point,
though, is
Mr.
we have
Montgomery.
maintained our finances. We have balanced our budget since '09, which you weren't around then. We had to make the necessary cuts. All the fire, the police, all the municipal employees, everyone had to make a sacrifice. From that time forward, we ensure that we have the capital needs. We have the money for those capital needs.
And I don't disagree with that.
Well, what you're proposing is says that we have something in the future that we're going to have a need for, which it does not make sense what you're proposing. You're wanting to take this man's profit and say that we don't have the funding available in the future, or may not have the funding.
Well, Mr. Montgomery, I don't have a crystal ball. Maybe you do, but
well, I sure go on my record, not empty promises. I look back at me and what this council has done. I sure do. You're right.
Let it be noted that the chair recognized Mr. Smith. Mr. Montgomery, we will get your comments next.
Just to follow up, I'm not saying that Bossier City currently is irresponsible with money, but we will not all seven be sitting in these chairs forever. Eventually, people are going to come after us, and they're going to make decisions that affect the future of Bossier City. I am saying let's think forward and not just worry about today, but what could happen in the future and prepare ourselves.
All right, bear with it just another minute.
I don't think it's radical. I think it's being fiscally conservative and saying that, hey, there's going to come a time where a very expensive repair may come, and we already have the money to do it, and we don't have to go into the general fund to get that money. So that's my comments.
You little whippersnapper.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes. Well, number one, we don't use the general fund except for operating. We do not use general fund money, fund balance, for capital expenditures. It seems like what we need to do is have a lesson for certain individuals about how the budget works here in Bossier City and how we allocate
Point of order,
funds.
Mr.
Do I have
President?
the floor, Mr. President?
Order, please. Mr. Montgomery has the floor.
So we have set forth a financial plan, which has been very successful for the last 13 years. And we separate our funding for operational expenses, which is the general fund. Nothing comes out of the general fund that goes to capital expenditures, so that everyone understands that. We, as a council, and Mr. Williams and Mr. Darby, and we have had a budget committee annually. We look at what our capital needs are in the future. We have certain funding set aside for all of these capital needs, whether it's roadways, whether it's parks and recreation. We were just talking to Coach and Louis a little bit ago about the needs of a parking lot at Tinsley. We have the funding available because we do prepare for the future. Whether you want to call it a crystal ball or not, I call it just common sense. That's what I went to school for, was to be a certified public accountant. I practice public accounting. I understand governmental accounting. And I'm comfortable with where I stand and where the future of this city stands financially.
All right. So I'll stop it right there. Now, if you want me to rewind it any, I will, but I think that's enough.
Jeff, who's right and who's wrong? What we think that little segment right there is really indicative of Bossier City. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous semantics and gobbledygook. I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. When you bond yourself out to the level at the end of last year, $457 million, it has to come from somewhere. And so, yeah, maybe when you have an expenditure on a capital project, you tap into a fund set up by bond money, but you have to pay the bonds back eventually. And when you're on the hook for that amount of money, that's something that's not trivial. And we can debate about whether these capital projects were necessary. Some I think are, such as the southern extension of the Arthur Ray Key Way. I'm not so sure about how the northern extension has gone along, and other things as well. The arena is discussed. That was a significant capital expense by the city, and it continues to pour more money into that. You had the building of a parking garage over at the boardwalk. Just a number of decisions, I think, which built things that capital expenditures that really weren't necessary. And so that's why Bossier City has the largest per capita debt of any major city in Louisiana.
So I'm about to, since you mentioned the debt, I'm about to bring up the slides and all that. But let me kind of put you on the spot a little bit, because one argument for the Century Tel Center, CenturyLink Center, Berkshire's Grocery, whatever it is these days. One argument for pouring that money into it is, we've heard David made the argument before for quality of life. Now, off the top of my head, I think the city's underwater $500,000 in the Berkshire's arena, maybe more than that. I'm not sure the exact number, but in theory, the city would make that money back and possibly more. And I'm playing devil's advocate here in sales tax revenue from bringing these events in and other things. Does that argument hold any water in your opinion?
No, not really. I mean, you look at the current schedule. I think there's maybe 6 events over the next 9 months, something like that. You're looking at a loss. You're right. Typically, it's been in that range of $500,000 a year. Okay, so we're looking around 2% sales tax collection. We're looking at the occupancy tax. You look at those events and the people theoretically that come into town, and I'm sure there's some, but not a whole lot. And I haven't run the numbers, but I would be very skeptical that it would approach that amount of money in operating, again, losses. we're not even talking about the capital expenditures. I mean, just plunk down, was it 1.3 million for I forget, a generator or 300,000. There's other items that are constantly being put into it. So, it's a money loser. It doesn't make it back, and you can make that quality of life argument saying, well, we need to, it may cost us money, but it gives this venue. Well, there's no reason that the city has to operate that venue. It can sell it to the private sector, and they can run it. So that doesn't make I don't think it's a very good argument.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up. I think we want to go to these slides first. Is it what you want to use for reference first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'll let you take the wheel, Jeff, or Duke, and
yeah. So you see, this is a figure from the city's comprehensive annual financial report, which has to be done every year. They farm it out to some auditors, accounting firms that they compute it all. It's a requirement legally that they have to do this. They file it with the state, with the legislative auditor's office. On page 15 in black and white, there's a couple of figures. One is for the business type enterprises, which is water and sewer, the arena, other things, and the other is general government. They're about the same, roughly a little under 230 million each. So there it is, black and white. That's how much the city owes. So right there in print, the city's own finances. So I don't think there's any dispute, or can be any dispute, that there's a whole lot of debt out there for Bossier City. Now, if you move on to the next one, there's Bossier City's population, 62,701, according to the 2020 census, which, by the way, was several thousand fewer than what the city had been promoting for a number of years. I think the last figure, the estimate, it wasn't something they made up. It was something coming from the American Community Survey, which is run by the Census Bureau. They had pegged around 68,000, something like that. But lo and behold, when the census actually came out, it was really only 62,701, which is only not even 3% higher than it was in 2010. So, if you're running around talking about, well, Bossier City is this very fast-growing, bustling city, well, it really isn't. Parish did very well. In fact, the number of people that live outside the city now in parish, plus the other 3 minor cities in the parish, exceeds Bossier City. I think roughly now 47% of people in Bossier Parish live in the unincorporated area of Bossier Parish. All right, so that's our population figure. So, the first figure by the second, and what did you come up with?
Well, let's see. Let's go down here. Oh, per capita debt.
Yep, Bossier City, 70, just a little under $7,300 each. Again, that's not I would argue, not a trivial figure, and that's especially true if you look at it in comparison to the other major cities in Louisiana, and in particular the 2 peer cities, roughly the same population as Bossier City, Kenner and Lake Charles. And there's our figures. Bossier City at the top, so we're number 1 per capita debt, and it's not even close. I mean, Shreveport, there in second place. Understand that figure is pushed upwards by the fact that they have this huge consent decree with the EPA in their sewage system, which they've actually got ways to go on it. They've only, I think, about $375 million that they've borrowed to do that, and they're probably going to have to borrow another $800 million before it's all over. So that may change in a couple of years. You might see Shreveport fall ahead of Bossier City because of that. But yeah, it's not even close. And again, look at the peer cities. Kenner is 1/6 about both cities, and Lake Charles is about 1/9. So, you have to ask the question, how is it that these other two cities can apparently manage their own affairs without going wildly into debt, and Bossier City hasn't made that choice? It wasn't always like this. 15 years ago, I have to look back at the exact numbers, but as I recall, Bossier City only had something like 100 to 150 million in debt. And then there was this huge explosion of spending in about the last dozen years. Well, this tremendous amount of borrowing. And so that's where we are today. So again, I don't find very credible arguments that say that Bossier City does not have a lot of debt, not a lot of per capita debt. I just don't find that convincing.
Well, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead, Duke.
Well, Jeff, isn't it? Again, I'm taking the Rex approach here, playing devil's advocate, making the other side of the argument. Is this the two sides of the coin thing? Meaning that some people say the American way is to operate off of debt, and Bossier City, I think some people, in Bossier City would make the argument that, well, over the years, we've had a solid source of revenue in our, taxes. So, we're able to get bonds and be able to pay for capital projects, via these bonds because we've got a steady source of income. And to one of the points that you just made, about years ago and what Bossier's debt was back then, I think you said 150 million or maybe something to that tune. Isn't it accurate that in that, say, like the late 80s, wasn't the millage rates in Bossier was, say, around 28 mils versus today where we're at around 22 something mils? And
yeah, the 90s, yeah. In the 90s, it was higher. It leveled off, as I recall, in and around, about 15 years ago, pretty much leveled off at where at what we see today. Well, the thing is, you can look at this a couple of ways. First of all, you want to try to understand to see how much coverage the city would have in terms of revenues and debt expenditures. And actually, if you look at the ratio of debt to revenue per year, so basically looking at the latest figures of 2021 for all these cities. Again, Bossier City is not in very good company. At the top of the list is Shreveport. Its coverage is 385. So in other words, the debt in Shreveport is about 4 times the expected revenues, and then Bossier City is second actually at 314. So it's not that great. I mean, the other cities are a little bit less than that. Some are quite a bit less. Again, we look at Kenner, it's about 1, and you look at Lake Charles, it's below that. So in other words, they have, like in the case of Lake Charles, they have more revenues every year than they have debt outstanding. So I suppose they didn't want to spend on anything else. They just go ahead and pay it off in 1 year if they wanted to. That's wouldn't be the smart thing to do, obviously. But that's the meaning of that statistic. So in other words, the capacity that the city has, again, it appears over leveraged to me. And then the second issue here is, do we really want to spend all this money on capital projects in the first place? I mean, do we really have such, quote, needs that we had to go out and borrow so much money and do so many things with it? Assuming, of course, and there are other issues here. For example, I think Republican Brian Hammonds in particular on the city council has questioned the change orders that seem to so often come through that kick the prices of these projects up and up, and why that they don't seem to be anticipated. So whether the money is being spent wisely in terms of the actual execution of the projects is yet another issue. So it's I would argue to that again. First of all, that city is urged, and then secondly, that not all the capital projects that contribute to this over leveraging were things that need to be done. So, for example, I would say, again, going back to the arena, parking garage, etc.
So, in your opinion, let me just, again, might catch you off guard a little bit, but in your opinion, is the city of Bossier being run like it should fiscally? Or are there areas for improvement?
Yeah, see, we're the debt's there, has to be dealt with. We can't do anything, really can't reduce it now. You're just going to have to manage it over the next 20 to 30 years to bring this down. So if the city stops borrowing so much money and just uses what it has, I mean, this is, in my mind, going to be better governance. But the problem is the opportunity was missed. It was missed starting almost 30 years ago when you had the initial windfall of casino dollars coming to the city. And a couple other things elsewhere, the shale boom. You could argue the sale of Bossier Medical Center, although that was a comedy of errors in the sense that the city was offered allegedly $42 million by Willis Knighton in the mid-90s to buy the thing. The city said no, they'd rather have that little bauble out there. Willis Knighton, we know the rest of the story, opens a hospital, drives Bossier Medical Center into the ground, loses, I think, $3 million in its last year under city operation. End up selling it for 2/3 the price it could have gotten. Some of that money is now in a separate fund, and the city uses that to subsidize certain things. But the point being that what's done is done, and here on out, the city can spend more responsibly in terms of capital expenditures. But the opportunity is lost. I mean, if just kind of the back of the envelope calculations, if you were to take just that 230 or so million that's in general government, and if you cut that in half, so you just say, all right, well, let's say we didn't build the carriageway, or we didn't build the arena, or something like that. So we lop off 115 odd million. If you run the numbers on that in terms of the money that would then be freed up for other things, it's like $10.5 million a year the city could be spending on other things, pay raises for employees, lower property taxes, whatever. So that was a lost opportunity. So that was not the road taken. Was, in my mind, irresponsible, and we're just going to have to live with it now.
Well, it's all very interesting, and it's the math, and the math is what it is, and like you said, we're going to have to deal with it forever, and it just seems like our city council members, not going to name names, but people like King David, want to paint this rosy picture that everything's just fine, and that he's a CPA and he knows what he's doing, and them young whippersnappers just have no clue. Anytime anybody just asks a legitimate question. And yeah, I agree. We're going to have to deal with this far into the future, and I, like you said, it is what it is.
Yep. Again, opportunity lost, and yeah, we'll just got to pay it off, and just hope that in the future, future councils don't so freely spend on all these various things that, if you're a politician in the city, you can walk around and say, look, I did that. All right, that's nice, but was it really something that was needed by the city?
Right. Well, yeah, did we have to borrow the money to be able to do that? Because, I think the bond commission, most of those deals are at around 4%. I may be wrong on that. I think the last time I looked up the Cypress district, it was somewhere around there. So, that interest does add up.
City's debt, yeah, between 2 and 4%. Yeah.
All right. Well, Duke, you got any other questions or discussion?
No, I think I did have another question, but I think we covered it right there. And Jeff, we appreciate you coming on and look forward to having you again down the road. I'm certain Bossier City is going to give us another opportunity to chat. I have no doubts about that.
Yeah, it's not the city, the parish, and this is Bossier, so.
That's right.
All right. Well, appreciate your time tonight. Appreciate you going through and explaining those numbers because, sometimes Duke and I get a little emotional and fired up, and so it's not the easiest thing for us to just go down the math and go down the numbers. So, and hey, anytime you've got something that, you want to get the information out, we try to, share your Bossier Views stuff out some and all that, but let us know and we'll be glad to share it out, or like Duke said, have you back on. You're welcome anytime.
Yeah, appreciate it, and thanks to you guys for doing what you do.
Hey, we're trying. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Sure.
Bossier Watch live broadcast is brought to you by David B. Womack for all your contracting and construction needs. The Outdoor News, fishing and outdoors for our area. Acadiana Mortgage, over 23 years in the mortgage business. Pelican Training and Consulting is an IWTP customized training provider with over 25 years of success to show for it. Call them for a free consultation today. Pelican Training and Consulting matches employers with 50-plus employees with training dollars. Smarter Geek, making technology easier. And the many supporters, donations, and folks sharing information and watching out for Bossier. Now, grab your popcorn and a drink. Here we go.